That year, disasters and man-made disasters shattered the tranquility of life. A teenager had to sell his body in order to bury his father. And since then, he has been in darkness. He was thrown in with the other slaves who were bound. And day in and day out, they practiced to the point of exhaustion, ate what they were given, and fought for communal food so they could get something. The protagonist was learning new human qualities every day. He learned to trust his neighbors, and also these neighbors could betray him at any moment. He was in the balance between life and death. But all this for him was the basis for development and returning to his village a few years later. The principle was constantly running through his mind. Either he would survive or die. But he wasn't afraid of either, and to him it was all like a test, like he was playing some kind of game. But still, he did not lose his moral principles and save people when they needed his help. I suggest we look at how the guy who sold his body sharpened his blade. Gulen trial. Within half a month, 10 monster heads must be obtained, and only then can it be passed. The squad stood near the monster as it stood there devouring someone's corpse. Some bald man asked, "Is this the same corpse eater?" She doesn't look very scary somehow and replied that his comrades should watch him chop off her head. The guy with the jingle bells on his head replied that a corpse eater was no match for their boss, so they would easily pass the test. The maiden asked that when they passed the test and joined the palace of Senlo, would they be able to live in abundance? The main character's name is Zhuhan, and his comrade's name is Liu Sheng. Zhuhan asked what they should do. The one replied that he didn't know yet and suggested that they just wait and observe it. The head of the other squad replied that just 10 heads and it would be over, and considered it a fairly simple task for him. The corpse eater looked at the man with her dead stare. The ringleader felt some kind of fierce pain. She chopped off his head with a single wave of her hand. The squads were shocked at what they saw. On the ground lay a head without a body that had been chopped off by a corpse eater. She stood with his head in her hand and devoured his insides. Blood splattered all over the place. She savored the taste of the man she had killed. The corpse eater heard the voices of her potential victims. Allies of the slain ringleader yearned for him. The protagonist's comrade yelled that they needed to get their feet out of here as soon as possible before they became her dinner themselves. The alien squad shouted for the heroes to wait for them and save them. No sooner had they made their feet. The girl from the alien squad had already been decapitated by a corpse eater. The kid with the bells on his head went after her. She decapitated him too. The corpse eater stood near the corpses of the alien squad. She got into a pose that she could use to speed up and be able to run even faster than before. The corpse eater is on the run for the heroes. They ran with all their might, but felt that they too would soon come to an end, just as the past troop had. The protagonist shouted to his comrade, "Where should they run to, lest they lose their heads on the way?" Thoth replied that he had no idea, and they needed to get away from her any way they could. The fog began to thicken, and the heroes could hardly see the road. Zhuhan shouted to Liu Sheng to be careful not to fall, because if he fell for even a second, he would say goodbye to his life once and for all. The heroes came running. "To the dead end," Zhuhan said hopefully, as they broke away from her. But it wasn't to be. The corpse eater caught up with the heroes and cornered them. She looked at them with her dead stare, anticipating what they would taste like. The corpse eater slowly crawled up to the heroes. Liu Sheng got into a fighting stance, and Zhuhan, confused, didn't know what to do next in such a situation. The heroes had no choice but to bare their blades and fight the corpse eater to the end, and they gathered their last strength and stood in a fighting stance. The corpse eater is tearing towards them. The heroes also weren't going to stand still and ran after her. Lucan swung at the corpse eater with his blade. But that's not the case. Even though the corpse eater is a dead walking eating body of others, she knows ninjutsu techniques. She hit the skull from above Luchen's head. Zhuhan was not about to leave his comrade in distress and swung his blade towards the corpse eater's head. But this mademoiselle was not going to give up so easily and hit the protagonist on the jaw with her foot. The corpse eater was just as about to kick Lucien in the face with her foot as Zhuhan flew aside from her crowning blow. Lucan was not about to give up and swung his blade towards the corpse eater. But she wasn't going to die either and ended up knocking the blade out of his hand and seriously wounding him. The poor guy flew off into a rock from such a powerful hold. The corpse eater looked happily at her next potential victim she was about to finish off. She pounced on the protagonist and was going to finish him off in an instant. The man's whole life flashed before his eyes when he saw a corpse eater about to chew his head off. But in an instant, he changes his mind about dying and strikes with a powerful elbow to the head. Liu Xin saw his comrade, who was fighting hard for his own life. He shouted to the corpse eater that she was a brute, unlikely to live to see the next morning. With a full swing through the air, he pounced on the corpse eater and he stabs her in the back with his blade, causing her to scream violently in pain. But still, this technique didn't work for him. The corpse eater tossed Liu Shan aside with all her might and was not hindered by the blade sticking out of her back. Liu Shan was disappointed that he couldn't pierce her through with his sword. She started to pull the blade from her back because it was preventing her from moving. Liu Shan saw that this attack only made her more angry, and the situation only got worse. The corpse eater was in a furious frenzy at this. She ran towards Lucan to finish him mercilessly for doing this to her. He realized that now the weapon was already lost, and he needed to figure out how he could dodge her attacks. The corpse eater looked at the poor guy with her dead fierce gaze and was about to finish him off. Liu Shan tries to knock her down thanks to a slip hold, but she took the initiative into her dead hands and grabbed him. She hung over him and was about to chew his head off. But it didn't. Zhu Han knocked the viper to the ground and it fell beside his comrade. Both heroes were lying down, coming away from such a scary situation. Zhu Han saw the corpse eater rise up again and pounce on Liu Shan. Her huge bloody fangs were a millimeter away from comrade Zhu Han's face. It already seemed like he was about to come to an end. The protagonist shouted at him not to dare die in front of him and rushed to his aid. He tried to remember all the highlights of his own training. The protagonist held his breath and rushed to his comrade's aid. He lunged at the corpse eater in midair, holding his blade with both hands. The corpse eater was already licking Liu Shan's head, anticipating his dead taste. But Zhu Han arrives just in time and stabs the viper in the head with his sword. The main character was laughing hysterically with shock. He pierced through her head so that his blade was a millimeter away from Lucan's face. He was panicked that his comrade was going to kill him and her too. Zhu Han pulled his blade out of the corpse eater, slicing through its head. He threw himself back, taking the sword back in his hands. The corpse eater screamed in agony from such a powerful blow. Zhu Han didn't understand. If the opponent didn't die, then, in that case, he needs to stand to the death and fight for his own life. At last, he was able to kill the bastard by chopping its head off with his blade. The corpse eater's head fell to the ground. He stood there laughing hysterically at finally being able to defeat the most difficult opponent that had nearly killed them. After that, the fog cleared, and the heroes were finally able to see normally what was happening near them. Both fell to the ground from being very tired after their battle with the behemoth, and finally breathed a peaceful sigh that they weren't in danger now. Liu Shan poked his finger into the sky and said that stars appeared on it. The protagonist replied that the sky was so beautiful and Gulen was now quiet and that they were able to survive as a result. He replied to Liu Shan that this year was indeed a long year. Previously, the protagonist lived in poverty and in constant illness, but still he wished his father wouldn't worry about him. The reason he sold himself into slavery and also his first acquaintances. The main character recalls how that year there was a lot of snowfall and many people died of cold and hunger. Everyone said it was the karma of the new Zhou emperor, who had killed his father and usurped the throne. He was dragging someone's corpse through the snow on a dilapidated sled. The kid himself was emaciated, sick and in pain and cold. The protagonist's adoptive father, Shu Chanzui, unfortunately did not survive this winter. The guy himself didn't want to work like an ox all his life and end up flipping out on the street, so he had to sell his body. The protagonist stood opposite a sullen uncle with a corpse in his sled. The peddler stood and said that there were many places where one could sell oneself to bury one's relatives. So why did one come to him? The kid replied that when he sells himself into slavery, it is usually for life. However, he had heard that he could have a release after 5 years. The one with a smirk on his face looked at the guy and replied that this was indeed true, but he would have to really risk his life for 5 years so that he could get the money and be free from slavery. The protagonist understood these risks and agreed to the offer. Otherwise, the deal would not have been favorable to the bargainer. The man asked the guy why he chose this particular path and not some other. The lad replied that before his death, his father had allowed him to sell himself to wealthy people and told him that if he was resourceful, the owners would be benevolent to him and he would thereby earn a good life. Also, his father told him before he died that it would be the best decision of his life. But he told the merchant that he did not want to submit to fate and that he was free to choose his own path. The boy buried his father and said near his tombstone that he had raised him for 12 years, but he could only repay him in this way. Now he's destined to live the rest of his life alone. So he asked his father not to worry about his adopted son in heaven. Though he was prepared for 5 years in this brothel, he never expected what he would have to face. The peddler brought the boy to a shack where some men were sitting. He threw it at them. Zhu Han introduced himself in front of his colleagues. He asked what about them if they wanted to introduce themselves, to which they looked at the kid with disdain. He realized that he was destined to be alone without ever forming friendships with anyone. The kid sat down in a corner away from everyone. He realized that the picture before him made him miss the old days and his father's upbringing. It made Zhuhan uncomfortable, but he must become stronger to continue living. Eventually, the guy got tired. After that, they were trained every day on how to properly work their fists and feet. The peddler, the coach, got angry at the guy and angrily said, "Didn't he eat that he was so unfocused? Here you always have to compete with others for everything. If you don't want to be bullied, then you have to become stronger and fight for anything, even for a piece of bread." Day after day, training is not what it used to be. Injuries sustained during training are recovering faster and faster, and the body is getting stronger because of it. Before Lu Cheng came along, the workouts changed from day to day. The peddler brought Lucan to them. He threw it as hard as he could on the floor. He didn't expect him to behave so brutally. Zhuhan noticed the new both comrade and rival at the same time. The protagonist held out the bread to Lu Cheng, which made him surprised that the latter treated him with kindness. Zhuhan replied for him to eat. He had an extra bun left and knew he was hungry. Lu Cheng replied in disbelief. Did the kid want to buy him in this way? To which the latter denied his assumption with surprise. Lu Cheng replied that 3 groups of people had changed in the last month, and that here the ones who ate the most were usually the first to be taken away. With a psychopathic look, he replied that when the time came for them to be taken away, no one knew what would be done with them as a result. Zhuhan looked at him with fear. But still, he took the bun from the protagonist and began to greedily eat it. He replied to the protagonist that among the people who were taken away, he found that those who ate a lot fought better than those who ate little. Zhuhan answered him that it was obvious and that the ability to fight was very important here, and that was probably their main goal in buying people. His body has become stronger after training, but he wants to become even stronger so that he can live a much better life. The one gave him a surprised look. The protagonist realized that life was better, so he and Liu Shan shared sorrow and hardship together and soon became faithful partners. Liu Shan stood, applying a cold one to Zhuhan's temple to ease his pain. They trained their arms and legs diligently, and their bodies grew stronger, after which they were taken for a test. The peddler angrily told the boys to get ready to go outside and that their time was up. He hit them over the head with all his might to get them to pack up more briskly before they had time to think anything through. They were taken to a place called Gulen, which was full of evil monsters. In front of Zhuhan, there was a mysterious girl who was holding a half of bread in her hands, and she wanted to treat him with it. Lu Shan stood in the cave with a leaky sack on his shoulders. Both heroes were lying on the ground in the forest. Liu Shan tells Zhuhan that he would have been finished if not for the protagonist, but the latter had his own thoughts. Then his comrade tried to bring the dreamer back from heaven to earth. Lu Shan asked, "Why is he counting crows? Is he dreaming about that girl again? He knows that he will see her in at least 5 years, and what's so special about her?" The protagonist replied that he just didn't see her eyes, and if she hadn't given her half of her bun then, he would have starved to death long ago. The mysterious, beautiful white-haired girl gave the protagonist half of her bun, but later they were separated by some grown men. Zhuhan replied that if he survived this hell, he would definitely find her. "But what if she's already married?" Lu Shan answered him. The protagonist said that somehow he hadn't even thought about it. But Lucan cheered him up, saying that if there was any trouble, he wouldn't care about it and would help him fight the girl off. Zhuhan cheerfully said in return that he would help find his kin in return. The 2 dreamers gave each other a big friendly hug and thus cemented their promises. Meanwhile, the heroes did not sit still. They hunted and ran away from all sorts of evil. Liu Shan chopped off the monster's head while the gawking Zhuhan stood back and watched this spectacle. The other way around, Lu Shan was holding back the monsters and the protagonist was chopping them down. They put the monsters' heads on the ground and hid them under a sheet. The main character counted and said that they had 8 heads, which was a pretty good result. But Lu Shan was realistic and replied that here they were out of supplies and should look for something edible in the forest. His father said that in the old days demons ruled, but people somehow managed to drive them to the south of the Kunlun Mountains. And although demons exist in their time, their power is far from the original. Their conversation was interrupted by someone. Liu Shan rushed to hide the monsters' heads from the uninvited guests. They were approached by some youngster who was shocked at such an affectionate welcome. Toth replied that he was just looking for shelter to get out of the rain, and he didn't realize the place was already occupied. Lu Shan coldly replied to now scurry away from the cave. The little boy frightenedly asked that they let him stay, said he was also sent into the forest for a test, and it had been raining outside for a couple hours. If they kicked him out, he would die of cold, but Lucan insisted that he get the hell out. But the boy did not give up and again begged them to leave him in the cave while it rained, and that he would just sit quietly in a corner and not disturb them. Zhuhan replied to let him stay for a while. Liu Shen thought that how long they had known each other, and he was still as kind as ever, even if he had become stronger. But there was something wrong with this kid. The kid sat down near the fire to warm himself while the heroes were on guard so that they would not be suddenly killed. He answered them with astonishment at how many heads they had already collected and asked them whether they had obtained them themselves or had someone help them. Liu Shan coldly said that it was none of his business and asked, what did the young man have in his bag? He replied that it was nothing special, just a couple of fruits he had found in the forest, and offered them a taste. They, in turn, did not refuse the offer, for they were hungry. He said the loot had cost him a lot of effort and asked to accept the fruit as a token of gratitude for letting him into the shelter. But that wasn't the case. He scattered the splinters of the bonfire towards the heroes when he could catch them off guard. Burning boards flew towards the heroes. Both of them were blinded for a while. Liu Shan stood there and tried to see something, but was blinded by the hot ashes of the fire. A blade flew towards him. The protagonist pushed his friend away from imminent doom from an intruder, but Zhuhan was seriously wounded by the blade. Liu Shan was shocked when he saw his best friend being stabbed through and through with a sword. The protagonist is severely wounded in the chest cavity. The opponent pushed the wounded troublemaker aside and prepared to duel with Liu Shan. Lucan's leg was seriously injured. The wound from the corpse eater had opened up again. The enemy was standing there laughing hysterically. Does he really want to save his buddy? He offered the protagonist's buddy to watch him save him when he'll chop his head off. Zhuhan was lying on the ground seriously injured. He couldn't even move. Liu Shan was not going to leave his friend to die so easily. He rushed to the rescue. He shouted after his enemy that he dare not touch his brother. A serious battle broke out between them. The enemy swung his blade at him. He praised Liu Shan for his skill, but he was not going to stand still and listen to his flattering words. He followed him with his blade. The enemy pounced on Liu Shan with a manic gaze to finish him off. Liu Shan realized that his opponent was damn strong. Zhuhan mentally thought that his opponent had played a weak fool to attack his comrade and then incapacitate him when he ran to save him. It was urgent to come up with a survival plan. Turning around, the protagonist saw a severed human head under the enemy blanket. Zhuhan thought, why did he let him in? After all, this guy is killing people to pass the test. Liu Shan is in danger. The enemy praised Liu Shan for his own skills and believed that they had killed those demons themselves. And as he sees how hard he had been practicing all this time, they crossed their blades in a fierce duel. Liu Shan grabs his enemy's hand that had his blade in it, but it was a hoax. The opponent thrusts his blade halfway into Lucan's arm, trying to chop it up. The protagonist tried to get up and help his comrade, but the latter was seriously wounded and could not help him much. That sadist decided to torture Lucan before he died. He twisted the blade in his hand. The one was screaming frantically in extreme pain. The enemy asked if they knew that all these demons were slaves like them. These slaves had failed the test and turned into demons. All this time, they had been fed food with flesh particles imbued with demonic energy. Anyone who stays in the forest longer than 15 days becomes a demon. He already has 9 heads and he needs one more. So the one replied that some of them would have to die, and he was giving them a choice. The protagonist, being seriously wounded, rushes at the enemy with his blade to protect his comrade. The one replied that Zhuhan had made his choice and he would be his victim. Meanwhile, Liu Shan took hold of the blade with both hands and began to pull it out. He was in a hell of a lot of pain, but he wasn't going to give up. The sadistic maniac was shocked at this turn of events. He started shouting to the one to let go of his blade. Otherwise, he would regret it a lot and both would die as a result. The protagonist had no intention of letting him live and attacked him with a blade. He pierced the arm of his enemy. He was surprised that he was so fast. Zhuhan stabbed the enemy with his blade, and at the same time, Liu Shan pulled the enemy's one from his shoulder. The enemy was confused as he was stabbed from both sides at once. The protagonist continued the onslaught on his opponent. The one couldn't stand it and shouted at them that they had asked for it, and now he would finish them both at once instead of just one. Liu Shan rams behind him, and Zhuhan pierces the front with his blade. The enemy screamed in hellish pain. The protagonist looked dead-eyed at the traitor who decided to take a swing at their lives. Liu Shan looked at his enemy with a treacherous gaze. Finally, they were able to fight off the enemy. He fell to the ground. The main character's wound was very serious, and he started to lose consciousness. He fell to the ground and was on the verge of death. He replied to his comrade that he should have listened to him and kicked that asshole out of the cave. Now he has 10 heads and he has to take them with him. He replied that at least one of them should pass the damn test. The demon's heads lay in one pile. Lu Xun handed the protagonist his bell. The one replied that he was correct in his observation that someone was one of them. He did not want to leave his comrade to die and was willing to accept his own death in his place. He rang the bell. From the bright cave came the sound of a bell. He replied to the protagonist that he was a strong guy, but this ordeal was much scarier than he had imagined, so he better pass it first. And he should live a great life for his comrade. Someone was rapidly approaching the cave. The secret mercenaries were rapidly moving towards her. They approached the entrance where the signal was given. They saw that the kid was unconscious, but he had accomplished his goal and all 10 heads were in place. The travelers looked at each other and wondered what to do next. One of them pulled out his scroll on which it read, "He is unconscious, but the goal was accomplished. All 10 heads are in place." There were rumors in Fenglin City that the governor had filed a lawsuit as far as the imperial court. The interviewee agreed and added that given how unsafe the city is right now, the maiden wondered what would happen to him next. Even though he hadn't reached the celestial hunter stage yet, he was still an excellent practitioner. She offered her companion a drink and enjoyed the night city. The head guard, who held a torch in his hands, ordered the soldiers not to fall asleep, for they were obliged to guard the city. The soldiers accepted their commander's order and went to their post. The mysterious man suggested we go back to their rams. This is the governor of Fenglin City. He told the man that if he wanted to kill him, let him kill him, because he had expected such an outcome when he signed the documents. The governor was being held captive by Zhu Han. He asked the one who thought he was a tough nut to crack, since he wasn't going to say anything. The governor's son is wounded by the protagonist's partner, so that under the onslaught, he gives away everything they need to know. And also another mercenary put a knife to his wife's throat. The protagonist asked the governor if he knew that the assassins of the Hell Asura clan were not limited to their target, and as a result, his entire family would also come under attack. This was the most painful point for him, and he was ready to tell all the secrets to save his family members. He got on his knees and begged for his family's mercy in return for telling them everything they needed to hear. The protagonist signaled for the mercenaries to wait and do nothing. The governor's son broke free and ran to his father's arms. The father hugged his family, barely holding back tears. The mercenaries at the same time glared mercilessly at them while they were in the process of reuniting. The governor replied that Gong Ling, Prince Gong Ming's nephew, recently settled here as the commander of the Wolf Division. And because of Fengling's close proximity to the borders, they have many soldiers living with them year-round. As commander, Gong Lin was constantly taking bribes. There were also several deaths of soldiers and civilians involving him. Shu Han silently continued to listen to him. The governor replied that, as a faithful servant of his emperor, he could not tolerate such a thing. If it is left as it is now, his people will never be able to live in peace. The only thing he cares about is that after he dies, Gong Ling won't leave his men alone, which means he will betray the emperor's trust. He apologized to his wife, to which she replied that he had nothing to apologize for, and that even though she was far from politics, she still understood that he was doing good and was proud of it. The son replied to his father that he was scared, and he told him not to be afraid, because his father was near. The protagonist made the following decision. He swung his blade and killed the mercenaries who were with him. Blood spatter flew toward the governor's family and into the governor himself. Decapitated mercenaries were lying near the family. The governor was shocked at what the mercenary had just done. Shu Han replied that the Wolf Division was under the command of the Long Night Department, and they were already considered to be ruling the entire Great Empire, and even the princes and ministers couldn't influence them. He ordered the family to run away from here as soon as possible, or he would not be able to help them. The governor thanked him for saving them. The man replied that he had heard that the Hell Asura clan was very meticulous about the mission and whether the man would be all right, and offered to help him, to which the man replied that he had his own ways and they themselves should not return to these places again. The governor promised to repay him for the kindness he had done them. The entire family ran out of that bloody soul hole they could have died in if Zhu Han hadn't saved them. Meanwhile, the main character was writing something on a piece of parchment with a brush. He wrote a report that dated April 9th, 17th year of the Tianyuan era. Yan Tuan Shan clan was wiped out, and Hun Yao and Xing Peng fell in battle. He tied this message to the leg of a falcon to carry it to its final destination. He promptly flew to deliver the letter. The protagonist came out of this city that was blazing with bright flames. Now he's got Gong Ling in his sights. The people saw that someone had been strung up against the city wall and was wearing official's clothes. Someone in the crowd shouted joyfully that he was finally dead, in response to which he was told that such a thing could not be said out loud. The woman asked people not to push, and she herself didn't understand what the big deal was, that he was hanged. Why gather and watch such a thing? The dead Chinuch hung in the air with his tongue hanging out. She was shocked when she saw Gong Lin hanging on the wall. The protagonist arrived in town holding an important token in his hands. On the parchment, he had written May 5th, Jingsheng City, Chongzhou Prefecture, Asura. Jingsheng is the central city of Chongzhou Prefecture, and there are tons of great fighters here without them. But they still decided to gather everyone here together. The protagonist suspected that something big was brewing here, so he needed to keep his eyes open. Zhuhan noticed something. Along with the crowd walked the Wuchen brothers, as well as their escorts Bullhead and Kanalika. The messenger of Asura was also present along with them. The magistrate said for everyone to listen to him. He had already reminded them, but he would remind them again that King Chu Jiang and King Bian Sheng had assigned this task as a top priority, and it should be done first in priority. The messenger replied that they could proceed with the fulfillment. He wanted everyone to pay attention to him. The protagonist wandered into the crowd and listened to him. Someone followed the mysterious man in the cape. He took off his hood. He was a gray-haired, mature man. His name is Yuan Xiuqing. The protagonist asked him what exactly was the reason they were brought together in this place. The one replied that the infernal Asura clan had received a report that Shanghai Liu had left Jingsheng City. Zhuhan asked, did the clan really want them to kill him? Yuan replied that the sword genius who had stolen one very valuable blade from the tomb, causing many factions to pursue him for 30 years. But all pursuits were unsuccessful. The protagonist replied that the clan only kills those with a bounty on their heads, which means someone was putting a huge bounty on his head. One of the 8 elders of the Linglong Pavilion, Lun Kunyun. The Linlong Pavilion is the largest sect in the Zhou Empire, and is the protagonist and clan tasked with killing one of their elders? Yuan said that wasn't really true and that Lun Kunyun was going to chase after Qianhai Lu, and that those should only set things up so that he would die. That's a good enough way to avoid conflict with the pavilion. The protagonist replied that that's what Emperor Song sent the magistrate for. Xu Cheng replied that the 10 pit halls considered this mission to be extremely important, and up until this point, he had allowed him some miscalculations. But this time they had no margin for error, and so the clan together with Xu Cheng must kill every single one of them. The protagonist was outraged. Why should he fix other people's mistakes instead of others? Walking away from the hall, Yuan said that he could call it whatever he wished, and that in the future to expect orders from him and carry them out without delay. Zhuhan sighed heavily and said that it would be a long year for him. The protagonist has traveled to a destination where he will have to complete a mission. It will be a long and final year, and then freedom from slavery will follow. And finally, he can begin the search for Liu Sheng's kin and find the girl from his childhood. The following actions took place in the Linlong Pavilion. The maiden from Zhuhan's childhood stood on the balcony of the house. Her name is Kekken, and someone called her inside the house. The men were talking amongst themselves. One of them, unfortunately, had not been informed of the details of the operation, and the other replied that to hell with the operation, they should take care of themselves with their level of cultivation first. So those made the decision to enjoy the tea. The mercenary signaled to his clan that they could proceed with the operation. Together they spectacularly jumped off the roof so that they could not be heard and went unnoticed. The guard of the premises was shocked when he saw a whole squad of mercenaries jumping down on him from above. He stood in a fighting stance, snatching his blade from its sheath, and asked, who were they and what did they want? The mercenaries wasted no time and were just as ready to strike back at the guard. The poor guard's sword shattered into small pieces, and he could no longer defend and fight properly. With a deft move, the mercenary cuts off the guard's head. They flew in and started killing those who were enjoying the tea party. The bloody maiden lay beside the guards who were lying on the floor. Zhuhan was shocked by the sight he saw. He kicks in the doors of the manor to see what's inside. The protagonist snuck into a room that was dark and silent. Kekken could barely contain her emotions, lest she give herself away to the mercenary and fall at his hand. But he still heard something and rushed to the room to find out what was going on. He took the blade in his hands to be ready for a possible fight with his opponent. The girl couldn't stand it and sighed nervously, and the main character heard it and started making his way closer to her. He rushed swiftly in the direction from where the noise was coming from. Zhuhan grabbed the girl by the throat. She asked him to spare her and not kill her because she was innocent. The protagonist was shocked at who he saw in front of him. She floundered, trying to catch air to keep from being suffocated by his hand. Her neck was starting to turn blue. The protagonist began to remember something. Was she the same girl who had given him half her bun as a child and kept him from starving to death? It was definitely her. Kekken was startled and surprised. Juhan let her go and told her to run away before something terrible happened. The mercenary spotted the protagonist with the girl and shouted to him in surprise. Why did he let her go? He stood holding his blade in his hands and said that they were commanded to kill everyone without a second thought. The mercenary threatened the protagonist that if he let her go, their mission was over. He's going to get them all punished. So he decided to kill the defenseless girl himself. In her crying eyes, she could clearly see the mercenary who was rapidly approaching her to finish her off. But in an instant, his blade was a millimeter away from the girl's neck. He asked in a dying voice, "Why is Juhan doing this to him? For what reason does he disobey the order of the higher authority?" The protagonist stood silently beside the corpse of the mercenary and beside the girl who was frightened by the sight she had seen. He grabbed her arm and dragged her to a safe place where she could hide from their deeds that couldn't be challenged because of the leadership. Juhan threw Keiching out into the street, letting her run away before something terrible happened to her. Flying away, the girl was shocked at what was just happening at this moment. Why would he do such a thing? Why didn't he kill on command? She landed on the ground and tried to escape, but she was surrounded by mercenaries. They said that they knew that the first group could not be relied upon and that it was time for them to draw their blades to kill the witness. But Juhan wasn't going to let it go. He swiftly attacked the mercenaries to protect his childhood maiden. With a deft punch, he knocks out the assassin by hitting his carotid artery. The other one's head was cut off with his blade before he could even realize what had just happened. The third mercenary got into a defensive stance to eliminate the traitor, but still he could not hold his defensive position and was knocked out by a blow to the apple of his eye. He asked the protagonist why he was doing this. Juhan takes his partner down with a single punch. He then started walking towards Kekken to protect her from the next onslaught of mercenaries. He stood and glared at his fellow clansmen, letting them know that if they attacked him and the girl, they would be instantly killed. One of the mercenaries began to run, calling for help from the rest of his comrades, while the others stayed behind to cover him, lest Juhan run after him and finish him off before his time. Juhan and Keiching had escaped from the house where the mass harakiri was taking place. The mercenaries ran after the fugitives to kill them both. They began to chase them, swiftly continuing to run after them down the street. One of the assassins shouted to the clan to keep running after him. At this time, the protagonist hid behind a corner so that he wouldn't be found. Keiching was glad that they were saved and that they were now safe. They glanced amongst themselves. The protagonist replied that given the way the infernal Asura clan conducts business, they are far from safe. The girl was horrified when she heard their name, but the protagonist calmed her down and promised to help her escape the city. She didn't understand until now why he had decided to help her. They began to flee the city together, skirting the mercenaries through the alleys. Juhan, along with Keiching, ran out of the manor. They crouched in the woods to rest after their pursuit. The protagonist has dropped some kind of letter by a raven. It said that the assassination attempt had failed, and now Lun Kunyun had moved to cultivate in the Valley of Stones, and for him to bring the girl and find the target, and not to appear in the Asura Dark Hall again. Juhan clutched the letter tightly in his hand with anger. Keiching noticed that he was wounded in the arm. She decided to get her healing potion to treat the mercenary's wound. The girl began to treat the wound with some healing ointment to ease his pain. Juhan was shocked at what she was doing to him, and so he got into a fighting stance just in case. He gave her a disgruntled look. Keiching replied that his wounds needed to be treated. He blushed at such words and said he would look into it himself. The girl asked him to let her treat his wounds, as she had grown up on Zhuanhe Peak, which was famous for its doctors. She treats everyone as her own kin, though she has never treated anyone but her own kin. The protagonist sat down next to the girl again, and she began to treat his wound. She bandaged it, and he felt much better. The girl was reverent about the treatment process, so as not to accidentally harm her savior. Juhan's expression on her face made her blush dramatically. His hand spontaneously reached for the top of the girl's head to stroke it. She replied with a smile on her face that she was done treating the wound. She saw that the man wanted to pet her and shied back. The protagonist was embarrassed by such an act and turned aside, but still thanked her for such a favor. Kekken became embarrassed at his words. She asked the protagonist, why did he save her from certain doom? He replied that he just wanted to, and that he wasn't the one to thank, but rather, He was the one who wanted to thank her when the opportunity presented itself. The protagonist stood up and replied that they had to go and that he would take her home, to which the girl responded by agreeing. They have arrived at their destination. It was the village of Gupang. Shuhan replied for her to now go on alone without him. She asked him, what about him? What would he do next? She asked him to go to the pavilion with her, that she would give him a false identity and he could live a carefree life without thinking about anything. But he still declined the offer. Then she asked for her name, or better yet, for him to take off his mask and for him to let her see his face. Zhuhan replied that he couldn't do that, as it would be dangerous for her to know too much about the clan. But she insisted. Then he asked her to introduce herself to him and he would take off his mask in return. She introduced herself to him, identifying herself as Chinkeching. And the guy in return kept his promise. He took off his mask, but his face was covered with a cloth. She didn't expect this turn of events. Zhuhan replied that they were now even. In response, she said in an offended voice that it wasn't fair. The protagonist said that she wants to protect him through Linlun Pavilion, and he appreciates it, but the pavilion is only her home, not his. Therefore, he turned around and walked out of the village. Now he was alone with the Hell Asura clan. 7 days later, on the border between Chongzhou and Shuzhou provinces, the protagonist is chased by Asura clan mercenaries. They brushed him off on all sides and it seemed he had nowhere else to run. They attacked him with only one purpose, to kill the traitor and avenge their fallen clansmen. But Shuhan was not going to give up so easily. He deftly and swiftly swung his blade to slice through the opponents one by one. The protagonist sat on the corpse of the enemy to both rest and show the others that he will not give up without a fight, and that those will not be happy if they continue to attack him and if they do not leave him. One of his allies told his allies that he was exhausted and that it was time to finish him off and avenge his fallen comrades. But they realized that he was not a bad guy and that it would be bad for them if they attacked him. But the latter still insisted on his own and ordered him to be mobbed and not given a chance to regain his strength so that he couldn't attack anyone further. The protagonist realized that you need to kill the ringleader, and after that, the six will scatter in different directions. But the leader was not going to give up so easily. He snatched the blade from the protagonist with his bare hand, even though he was wounded. But he still decided not to die so easily. Zhuhan was stunned and didn't know what to do, for he couldn't pull his blade back out to deal a more serious blow. The protagonist was attacked from behind by another mercenary. Zhuhan has been seriously injured from behind. His arm was chopped off. Looks like that was the end of his battle. But suddenly, some old man came out from behind the trees and looked at the youngster who had no arm. He didn't understand. Where did he come from and what was he going to do? The protagonist shouted to the elder to run away and stay away from him. Otherwise, he might get seriously hurt too. Zhuhan realized that he was about to come to an end, but at least he would try to save the old man from a senseless death. He began to crawl towards him to help him escape. The protagonist left a bloody lawn of grass behind him. The mercenaries noticed that Zhuhan had passed out, and one of them ordered him to be dragged to the base to be punished properly. The old man turned to them and asked, "Is this the way to treat a living person? Are they inhuman?" One of the clansmen looked at him in surprise. He replied to him that he shouldn't behave like that in front of the Hell Asura clan. The old man was shocked. He didn't know you were from the clan. The clan leader replied that he was grabbing information on the fly and warned him to get out of the clan for good while he had the chance. But the grandfather wasn't just any grandfather. The grandfather was a fighter. He chopped everyone up with his blade. The old man replied that their bloody clan had kept him busy for 30 years. Next, the events unfold in some wooden shack. When he woke up, the protagonist saw a black silhouette in front of him, whose eyes were glowing very brightly. It was a cat! He was staring intently at the protagonist. He meowed heavily, sighed, and finally lay down at Zhuhan's feet. The protagonist did not understand where he was now. He tried to remember what had happened to him. He saw his rewound, severed arm, and everything finally came to mind. His arm was chopped off by the Asura clan mercenaries. The old man heard the youngster finally wake up. The kitty ran up to his gray-haired master. Zhuhan thanked him for his rescue, but the latter denied that he didn't need it, like a sheep needs parchment. But the cat didn't care about the dialogue of the leatherman. He sat on his grandfather's lap and purred happily while he stroked his head. The protagonist didn't understand then the reason why he saved him from this mess. The old man replied that the clan's assholes had been bugging him for 30 years, so he killed them. Maybe now that ghostly Subhuti will finally get through to him. Except he didn't know that Zhuhan was also from this clan. The protagonist realized he wasn't getting along too well with the clan, and a ghostly subhuti. He just calls him by his name. Who is this old man? In any case, Zhu thanked him for saving his life, and if he needed his help in the future, he was at his service. The old man replied angrily, "Is he the only one who can be expected to help? So that a scum like him could help him." The old man didn't care what his clan was up to. He wouldn't kill him and ordered the young man to get out of his sight. The protagonist asked that the older man wanted to say in this way that he would not harm him just because he had saved him. The old man replied that he had ruled the world for 80 years and had never once broken his word. Then the protagonist could exhale calmly. He headed towards the old man. He sat down by the fire and began to pet the black furry thing. The old man was shocked by this impudence and said, "Then he can't kill him, can he?" Then the protagonist said that this way he would break his promise if he decided to finish him off. Grandpa replied in a rage that he wouldn't let him live here. Zhu said that the infernal Asura clan was looking for him everywhere, and the elder had an incredible level of cultivation, and they wouldn't dare to mess with him, so he had no choice but to follow him and was unable to repay him for saving his life for now. The old man replied that he was not concerned with conflicts with the clan and had no need for it. Then the young man got into an argument with him. If the elder left him, he would be finished, and thus he would break his promise. Grandpa was shocked at such insolence in his direction. The armless kid thanked him for the agreement and to make sure he didn't give him any trouble in the future. Zhu promised to help him with his daily chores. He tried with his one hand to grab the old man's blade. He could not lift it, for it weighed quite a lot. The old man was angry and said that if he wanted to help him so much, he should carry his blade for him. If he could not lift it by tomorrow, he would throw it out of his house and let him blame himself for it. He took the guy's katana. The guy was shocked that he was waving it around like a feather. That's when the protagonist gathered his courage. He put the sword on his back, on his wound. The old man asked him how he should carry the blade. He replied that it was hard, but bearable. Grandpa was greatly surprised at such words. He told the kid he'd see how long he could keep it up. The protagonist turned to him to ask, "What is his name?" The one introduced himself, calling himself Shanghai Lu. The old man was sitting near Longji City, Shuzhou Province. He thought that when he sneaked into the city, he could finally meet old bastard Yue. The sword sect respects strong men. He has spent his life practicing wielding his sword and wants to find out what they are capable of. Unfortunately, their sect is far away in the mountains, so the only thing left to do is to try his hand at the neighboring town. Following the old man was the one-armed protagonist who was dragging his heavy sword behind him. He threw it to the ground. The panting boy sat down beside Lu Chenhai to rest after such a hard journey. Grandpa gave the kid a bun and he thanked him profusely for it. He greedily gulped down the dough like he was out of his mind because he was unrealistically hungry. The old man was shocked that immediately after eating, the young man started practicing. There was an ominous martial aura emanating from Zhu, showing that he was practicing seriously. He conjured a magic ball with a dark aura. The protagonist was able to conjure up as many as 2 of these balls with just one hand. Shanghai Lu was puzzled. Was this the famous Asura technique? What good was it if it hurt your enemy as much as it hurt you when you used it? Zhu asked in surprise. What did he mean by that? The old man replied that balance was needed in cultivation, and the technique should be tough but also soft, and the cultivation of the body should be on par with the cultivation of the mind. He also added that this idiotic technique that Zhu used, attracting demonic energy to that forcibly tempered body instead of spontaneously. Taught, though, develops faster than owners of other techniques. But over time, the payoff of using such techniques becomes stronger and more obvious. Not only will there be problems with the body, but it will become much harder to cultivate in the future. The protagonist thanked the elder for such an invaluable lesson, but he only called the kid a jerk because he didn't understand anything as a result. He added that let the man ignore the words. That was his business, but that he should not say later that the man had not warned him about it before. Zhu didn't ignore the lesson. He said that the world was very unfair, and that for someone with his background to obtain at least an Asura technique was already an incredible fortune. So what was the likelihood that he would be able to find something other than her? Shanghai Lu said that in cultivation, the body is the basis of everything, and the guy recently lost a part of his body, and he is a swordsman without a sword. But even though he can see that he has grown to become a holy monarch, but now he can be killed by any passerby. The only thing that distinguished him from a fish was his lack of gills. The boy agreed that he was worthless now, but he would not feel sorry for himself. Otherwise, everyone would think they had won, and he would rather die a hero than live like a coward. The boy replied that let him call him crazy, but he would not abandon his revenge and would get them even in the depths of the underworld. The Asuras of Hell. Their bloody ordeal took away the protagonist's brother. He hates himself for not listening to him back then, but he hates the clan even more. The following actions took place inside the city of Lunji. The old man told Juhan to stay in this manor for the time being because he himself had a couple of personal matters he needed to get away for. The boy was afraid that he was being abandoned, and he carried all his things and did not relax even for half a day, to which the old man threateningly objected that he would be back in a couple of days and that as long as he was alive, the clowns from the clan would not dare even pass near the city. But this did not calm the protagonist. He was still worried. In response, the grandfather replied that he still had his belongings in his possession, and without them, he would not be able to run far anywhere. He threw even his favorite cat Juan into his hands and told the guy to remember to feed her well. The cat was trying its best to escape from Juhan's hand to its master. It meowed at the top of its voice to get the old man's attention. He told the old man not to worry about all this and promised to do all his errands. He wished him good luck. The protagonist hadn't had a proper bath in days, and he could finally afford to relax properly. He asked Juan to sit on the table for a while he went to get some water, but the cat meowed at him unhappily. After a while, Juhan returned with a basin that was full of water. He felt the demonic energy, but everything was in place and there were no clan fighters here. Juhan noticed that Juan had disappeared somewhere. He called out to her, to which she mumbled, her voice barely trailing off. He saw that the cat was lying under the table, exuding a strong stream of demonic energy. The boy took the poor thing in his arms. He noticed that there was a strong stream of demonic energy coming from her. He needs to check the poor thing's condition as soon as possible. When he wanted to check her condition, he was shocked at the strange sensation that came from the cat. He didn't understand what was going on. Why was there such a fierce and ferocious energy coming from her? Little Juan's condition was caused by the incredibly ferocious demonic energy in her body. What should he do now to bring her to her senses and normalize her condition? Is it possible that the old man has been saving her all this time, suppressing the demonic energy? But now he has left the cat to the protagonist, and he has to think of something so that it does not throw off the ends before the time. What he came up with was this. The Asura technique gathers demonic energy around him to temper his body, and if he could drain the energy from Juan's body, the cat might get better. So spitting that this is a rather dangerous maneuver, it is necessary to act as soon as possible. He was going to harvest demonic energy from a cat. Her energy is very intense, and he needs to come up with some other plan to accomplish what he has in mind. Demonic energy began to hover in the air near the protagonist. He was shocked at how much energy the beast had in it, and he had only diverted a fraction of it, but his body was already at its limit. But despite this, he must continue to fight for the cat's life. He continued to gather demonic energy around his hand. It was getting bigger and bigger. She seems to be feeling a little better about these shenanigans. The protagonist's body was already at its limit from such actions. The cat finally calmed down and calmly laid down on the ground. Meanwhile, the demonic energy hovered near Shuhan's hand. Her energy began to burst inside the main character's body. He fell to the ground in pain. It rages in his meridians like an elephant in a china shop, and it wants to tear his body and run away. Shuhan realized that the matter smelled fried. He jumped out the window, breaking it. The protagonist landed on the ground, prepared for a future fight with someone. He was fighting with himself. He wanted to outdo himself. But still, it's too slow. The body is moving too slowly to disperse the demonic energy. But that meant nothing to him. He wasn't going to die so early, so he continued to train as hard as he could until his last breath to chase the demonic energy away from his body. He finally managed to cope with the raging torrent inside his body. It's dawn. The protagonist was very tired. He was muttering to himself that he had to live and that he didn't want to die. He had to. Lev, the protagonist, has lost consciousness. A purring therapy cat rushed over to Juhan to bring her savior to her senses. And the cat didn't come to purr on his ear. It took him by the scruff of the neck and threw him back into the house through the balcony. That's the power of a country cat. She lay on top of her rescuer and gave purr therapy to wake him up. The protagonist woke up in shock. He asked little Juan, was it really her who brought him back? She purred approvingly in response. He thanked her for such a favor. The protagonist was still recovering from last night's diligent midnight workout. He was surprised that he was able to break through to a new level of his strength, and just a little more, and he would be able to reach the peak of the Saint Monk realm. What's this? The cat brings Zhuhan good luck? The protagonist went with little Zhuan to the market. She looked at the Matryoshka dolls with a deep gaze, as if she was hinting to Zhuhan to buy her one. Or better yet, several of them, and preferably all of them at once. A real shopaholic cat. The protagonist still had to buy them with his senior's money and realized that he needed to start saving it. Zhuan, meanwhile, was already looking at the fish-shaped treat with an enchanting gaze. Zhuhan became embarrassed when he saw the way she was looking at the goods. She's so cute. He had to buy the fish too. She jumped on his arm, trying to grab the fish and drag it away from him, to which he told her to relax and he would cook it for her as soon as they got home. Zhuhan paced around the house tiredly, but he was still satisfied because it had been a very pleasant day. But suddenly, the main character heard something. Someone was moving furiously at the speed of sound in the street. Are these really clan members? Zhuhan looked out the window to see what was going on outside. The fighters are acting stealthily, probably afraid that they'll run into a senior officer as a result. Zhuhan, along with little Zhuan, were eating together at the same table. The main character told the cat that she has nothing to worry about because she has plenty of food, and when the older man returns, he will give her a bath. But half a month had passed, and the old man still hadn't returned. Zhuhan didn't understand. Why the hell hadn't he come home yet? The mercenaries stood outside and waited for Zhuhan to go outside. The protagonist was surprised, because before they at least hid in the shadows because they were afraid of the elder, but now they were ready to attack at any moment. No way something happened to the old man. It's gotten very crowded here, and he'd better move elsewhere with the cat. Zhuhan ran into the forest thicket with his companion. From behind a tree, he heard someone's footsteps. Someone was approaching them. The protagonist was alert. The Asura clan fighter came out and asked him, what did he think that he would hide behind Sankai's back and thus be safe? He was one of them, and he knows that the clan doesn't let go of its target so easily. The mercenary had green robes, which meant he was a rank above the protagonist, and the clan had put a lot of effort into dealing with some pawn like him. The protagonist and the cat were killed by Asura clan fighters. Zhuhan shouted to them that didn't they fear retribution from the old man? The squad leader only grinned and replied that he wouldn't do anything to them. After all, he had gone to Dusheng City to fight Yu Fuyao, so no one would come to his aid. Zhuhan didn't wait for him to tell him anything else. He lunged at the ringleader, even though he only had one arm left, but he was seriously ready to do battle with the crowd. With one hand, he continued to fight against the squad leader. He successfully parried the main character's blows. The ringleader replied that the one had a good talent and would be a pity to let him go to waste. Little Zhuan was not going to sit on the sidelines like this. She swiftly pounced on the leader to attack. The protagonist didn't expect this from her. She started clawing his eyes out. He screamed in pain as hard as he could. The cat clawed at the enemy with its claws. The protagonist was worried that she might get hurt. He promptly ran to her aid. The ringleader shouted to the squad to let them go without ceremony and finish them off. They mobbed the one-armed hero from all directions. The protagonist felt the demonic energy starting to build up inside the cat again. Zhuhan was stabbed in his arm. He cried out in pain, but he wasn't going to give up and kept fighting no matter what. He must protect the cat at all costs. One of the mercenaries lands a stunner of a leg kick to the back of the head. He kept beating him from behind while he tried to hold out so they wouldn't hurt the cat. The protagonist threw his blade at the mercenary. It pierced his head to death. Suddenly, a strange, powerful energy began to seep out from the old man's blade. The fighters noticed that he remained unarmed, and they had a chance to finally finish him off. Zhuhan asked remotely for forgiveness from the old man for having to use his sword to save them. It was very painful and hard for him to hold the huge blade. All the mercenaries pounced on the poor man with their blades to eliminate him. Zhuhan activated the power of the blade, and it shattered the ground beneath him, scattering all the opponents far away from him. The protagonist activated the power of the berserk with a demonic energy that was imprisoned in the blade. All of the mercenaries were shocked by such strength, and their blades flew apart. They didn't understand what was going on, why the one with one arm and a heavy sword could scatter them all by himself. And the sword was not simple. It was glowing with bright red runic hieroglyphs, which gave off incredible power. The leader of the squad rushed the kid into battle after being wounded by a cat. Little Zhuan sat on the kid's shoulder as he fought off the opponents. He fended off a punch from the ringleader, but he was not going to give up so easily and began to attack the protagonist with a series of lightning-fast blade strikes. But Zhuhan continued to heroically defend himself and the cat, which continued to sit on him despite the danger. The leader shouted at Zhuhan, How dare he injure him? Now he wouldn't even dream of a quick death. He will torture him to the point of exhaustion. He ordered his fighters to attack him all together and have them throw him to the ground, for then he would not be able to fight them off because he had only one arm left. The mercenaries piled up on the protagonist. They were ordered to kill him, but he continued to stand and defend himself. Shuhan's head was spinning. He didn't realize what was happening to him. The sword became heavy again and he couldn't lift it. The leader told him that no one would save him and he would die right here. No one can save the clan's traitors from death, not even Qianhai himself. But the old man was not of that opinion. He came out from behind the bushes and asked him if he was still sure of what he had said. The ringleader saw his fighters start to suddenly drop dead. The old man was seemingly helpless, but there is a young spirit inside him that controls him. He killed all the fighters who attacked the one-armed boy and his cat. They were happy to see an old man who had been missing for quite some time and never came back to them. The leader fell on his knees in front of his grandfather and begged him to spare him and promised to renounce the clan and become a monk so that he would not be killed. The old man replied to the one to go back to his base and ask his master if Liu Qianhai's name was enough for them to get behind the kid or not. The ringleader obeyed him and went to deliver Senior Master's message at once. He barely waddled his two into the woods to escape the fighting old man, but the man stopped him. He wanted to add something else to him. Thoth fell to his knees again and asked what more he wanted to add to it. Shuhan handed the cat to the old man in his hands. The old man replied in a rage that someone had yet to pay for the injuries his precious kitty had received. Also for the fact that the main character is now missing one arm and he's going to pay for it right this second. But the ringleader denied it and said that when they had already come, he didn't have a hand. The old man said his hands were fine when he left town and he's lying. The mercenary leader became very scared at such words. He took it and cut off his own hand. The old man was satisfied with this decision and let the mercenary go. The ringleader thanked him for having mercy on him and let him go away. He ran away, leaving his severed hand lying on the ground. The main character thanked the old man for saving him. Suddenly, the old man started spitting blood and said that this old geezer was a scumbag. He fell to the ground, passing out. The main character was shocked at what he saw. The next day, they were already walking together on the forest path. Shuhan asked Liu Qianhai that he left for the sake of challenging Yue Fuyao to a fight. He asked him if he had won the duel with him. The old man was silent in reply. The old man started to get indignant that this old stump wasn't playing by the rules. He came there with one sword, and he came there with two, and it was like he was fighting a four-armed boxer with his bare hands. The protagonist thought that, oh, there was a reason why he held the title of the greatest expert of the Path of the Two Swords for so many years. He asked where they were going now. The old man replied that their paths diverged here and he would go on his own. Zhuhan was dumbfounded by what he heard. He didn't understand what he was talking about. The old man replied that the young man was only following him to save his own skin, and if yesterday's one-armed bandit got to the ghostly Subhuti, he would personally come to him for a rendezvous. Even the cat was dumbfounded by what he heard. The guy asked the old man, "What about little Zhuan? Because besides him, no one else knows how to get all that demonic energy out of her." The old man remarked that it was not in vain to say that as a result he would go himself, and since they were so good friends with each other, he could take her with him. He asked the old man if he had decided to abandon his companion. The old man only left in silence. He tossed the kid some kind of book. Qianhai Lu replied that he should stop with his Asura technique because it was hurting him more than helping him, especially when he was using Zhuan energy. The techniques in the book, although not completely, would help to cure the effects of the Asura technique. He added that he let him consider it as a thank you for the treatment of little Zhuan. He added that he didn't expect anything more from him. He took back his sword and wished the boy good luck. Zhuhan tried to catch up with him to convince him to stay with him. The old man put his blade, which was wrapped in cloth, to his forehead. The cat hissed unhappily at the old man for abandoning her like this after all. The old man tried to stop the youngster, but in the meantime the cat grabbed the old man by his robe and started biting it. The old man kicked the cat away from himself. The main character didn't expect such an act from an old man. He caught a cat that ricocheted off a tree trunk. The old man threatened them to stay out of his sight. Zhuhan couldn't recover from such an act from an elder. The protagonist sat near the campfire exuding an ominous aura. He tried to match the ominous aura flow by sitting and meditating in front of the fire. Although he had only made a breakthrough a couple of days ago, but his cultivation had already stabilized. If he continued like this, he would soon be able to reach the peak of the Saint Monarch stage. The main character, along with the cat, were sitting and relaxing. Zhuhan asked little Zhuan what she thought of the old man. She only mumbled tiredly. He read the book and realized that it described about breathing pure jade. Zhuhan said that although the old man's character was not very good, but otherwise there wouldn't be so many people after him. The protagonist smells something wrong. The cat looked at him with a surprised look. He realized that the older man was in grave danger. The old man left behind him footprints on the ground, and if he really wanted to part with the main character, he would have just disappeared into thin air. But he left footprints. The only option that comes to mind is that someone is chasing him, but he is too badly injured, so he decided to leave them behind to avoid endangering them. Zhuhan smells blood. He told the cat to stay safe and he would go see what was going on. The cat jumped from his hand. The cat promptly jumped into the tree to observe what would happen next. The mercenaries approached the old man and replied that they didn't expect to catch the great Qianhai today. The mercenary leader asked, "Where is his legendary sword?" Zhuhan noticed that these robes, worn by members of the imperial court. The old man asked, "What kind of sword does he have in mind? He has only one blade, and if they want to take it, let them take it." The mercenary realized that although it looked unusual and ancient, it was still a bit short of the object that everyone alive had been chasing for 30 years. He flung his blade away from the old man. He replied for the old man to turn off the fool mode, and that in his majesty's name, he was ordering him to give him the legendary sword. The old man was indignant and told him to clarify who he was talking about. How long had the bailiffs of the imperial court been wearing black armor anyway? Was their chief planning to take over the government? The ringleader replied that he expected nothing less from the great Qianhai and ordered his mercenaries to tie him up and take him to a cage. They would take him to Liangzhou. The old man replied that Liangzhou was a fine place to meet old age, but he also told them to be careful, for there were many people after him and he would not want to die before his destination. The old man was punched in the throat with the full force of his fist. The ringleader ordered the old man taken away. Zhuhan walked by beside the corpses of the mercenaries. He thought about the fact that even clan fighters had an unwritten rule, namely that it was forbidden to contact the Long Night Department. So why the hell did the old man go to them? That bailiff managed to kick the sword so that it flew a couple of meters away. He was strong and at least a whole stage higher than Zhuhan, which meant that he didn't need a plan. Zhuhan shouted for little Zhuan to run after him. 5 days later at the Shuzhou border, the protagonist noticed that the mercenaries were leading an old man in a covered wagon. He needs to figure out something so he can sneak up on him unnoticed and free him. There are 4 or 5 groups following the wagon. Everyone is hostile, but no skirmishes have been seen yet. They are holding each other back. Very soon they will arrive in Liangzhou, and then the old man can no longer be saved from his doom. Kunai flew towards the mercenaries. The squad leader noticed this and shouted to them to get down. The opponents desperately fought off the surprise attack with their blades. One of the kunai pierced the cape on the wagon. The robe opened up and Lu Qianhai could clearly be seen underneath the cage. He laughed and asked, "Who has come for his soul this time? Will these brave men have the strength to defeat him?" The other mercenary squad noticed that Chang Hai Lu was sitting in the cage. They attacked the bailiff squad. The wagon defenders pounced on the raiders. The protagonist was watching this and replied that he knew that the older man had a lot of enemies, but that was too many. Fortunately, he also has enough guards, and if he's lucky, they can even save him. The defenders of the wagon fought back as hard as they could against the raiders, but there were more and more of them. The wounded defender replied that there were a lot of raiders, and they needed to retreat. Zhuhan didn't expect this outcome. He prayed that they would continue to kill each other, so that there would not be many of them left so that he could interrupt the rest of the units. The defenders are ordered to kill every last one of the raiders. The protagonist notices that now is his chance to save the old man from perishing. Zhuhan ordered little Zhuan to wait for him in the hiding place and on his signal. They would act according to the plan. The strategist cat accepted his offer and meowed approvingly. The protagonist thought that this whole crowd would fight amongst themselves until one of the groups destroyed all the others. If he rushed in now, he'd have to fight them all at once. From the center of the event came shouts of, "Shah, kill them!" The mercenary raiders killed all the old man's guards. They approached his wagon, and after making sure they had killed everyone, they approached the old man to finish him off. Zhuhan ran towards the old man to save him. The enemy squad heard someone's footsteps and looked worriedly to see who was running straight at them. The protagonist ran to attack his opponents. They did not expect such a turn of events and did not know what to do next. Zhuhan's demonic blade began to chop the enemy's sword in half. The protagonist chopped the enemy katana into 2 pieces. The enemy was disarmed. The leader didn't understand what kind of kid was so extraordinary that he killed a warrior at the peak of the Holy Monarch stage with a single blow. Little Zhuan wasn't going to stay away either and attacked the enemy raider directly in the face, scratching him and causing maximum damage to the enemy. They didn't expect that the guy would also have a wildcat with him. The leader couldn't stand it and attacked the protagonist. Zhuan was also not going to give up and attack the ringleader with a powerful demonic plasma attack. The enemy leader barely had time to dodge such an attack. He smirked and realized that Zhuan was very slow despite having a pretty good sword, so he must be careful, and then he would be able to overpower the main character. Zhuan smiled echidniacally in response to the ringleader's smirk. The protagonist released his sword from its cloth sheath and threw it towards the enemy. The ringleader thought that he had just missed with his sword and swiftly ran towards Zhuan when he saw that he was left unarmed. But the blade hit the old man's cage and destroyed it. Now Liu Chanhai was free, and now he could shake the old man from the bottom of his heart. The enemy leader didn't expect this turn of events. The old man stood across from him along with his partner, who sat on his shoulder. The enemy leader realized it was just a ruse so the guy could free the old man. The mercenary who had fallen to the ground was horrified at the sight of Changhai. Another raider from his squad ran up to help him. The protagonist, sighing heavily, asked the ringleader where he was going. He wanted to kill the old man, but now he just takes off and runs away from the battlefield. The raiders got on their knees and began to beg the protagonist, saying that they were stupid and begged to be spared, and that the little boy persuaded the old man not to kill them. Grandfather shouted back in his old man's voice at the mercenaries. Those took it as a sign of mercy and ran away sharply away from him before he could change his mind. They thanked him for his kindness. Zhuan asked why the man had let them go. The old man asked him if he could beat them or if he was just so good with words. The protagonist looked at the old man's waistband. He noticed that he was wearing chains for the immortals. These channels stop the flow of energy in a cultivator's body, so that's why the elder didn't release early. Zhuan was trying to figure out how the one could be released from the shackles. The old man irritably replied that these were handcuffs and there was no way at all without a key. The raiders, meanwhile, have returned to finish off the old man, along with the youngster and the cat. The enemy mercenary, holding the key in his hand, replied that he expected the other units to kill each other sooner or later, except that he didn't expect the old man to be followed by his allies. Now Zhangkai won't be so bored on the road at least. He headed towards the heroes with the intention of killing them. The old man shouted for the protagonist to catch his sword. He threw his blade towards the one-armed kid. He asked if he wanted to learn how to wield a sword. The protagonist didn't know what to say to this question. He hadn't expected such a suggestion from the old man. Zhuan even bowed to Liu Changhai and replied that of course he wanted to learn it. The old man patted the kid on the head for his eagerness to learn from him, despite having only one arm. Liu Changhai replied that he should sit still, and if he could master this sword art, they would survive today. If he didn't, they would have a wake in a year. The protagonist began to master the art of the sword to the fullest. He felt a surge of energy from the blade. Zhuan entered a state of fusion with the sword. He was able to control his energy. The ground beneath him began to cave in. In a world where the heavens are constantly moving, illuminating themselves with light, and the earth remains alive, only a true master can surpass his limits. Now the old man has ordered the lad to fight his enemies. The protagonist fought alongside the enemy leader. He tried to merge with the energy that flowed in the hero during the fight. The opponent was shocked that he was able to block his strike because he was a whole stage taller than him. The protagonist went into God mode while meditating during a fight. There is no pride in the true Tao. Death is the Tao, life is the Tao. Was the enemy ringleader bewildered at the way he was fending off his blows with his eyes closed? He didn't understand what the old man had done to the youngster. The world is covered by the heavens, and the sun and moon revolve around Xuchang. The winds gather the clouds together and break them again. The plants on the ground began to bloom again. This is the great Tao of the old man. The blade flew towards Zhuan. It was a millimeter away from his head. Did he really want to punch him through? No, the protagonist has begun to merge with his blade. Meanwhile, at this moment, enemy mercenaries started attacking him from all sides. Zhuan looked at those with his serious gaze. He replied to the mercenary that the great evolution of the sword had just been completed. He shattered the enemy katanas with his blade and drove his enemies away. The enemy squad flew away from such a heavy blow. Zhuan wanted to tell the old man that he had succeeded. But something went wrong. Zhuan got dizzy. The protagonist fell to the ground headfirst from exhaustion. Apparently, he had spent a lot of effort to match his energy and sword. The old man asked the boy if he was awake and if he was all right. The protagonist didn't realize that this had just happened at all. Liu Changhai replied that he had not expected that the seed of the great sword evolution was sprouting in his body. Zhu Han asked him, "What kind of seed is this?" He replied that when he was still young, he had ended up in the Southern Sword Tomb, and it was there that he had mastered the art called Great Sword Evolution. The conditions for cultivating this art were incredibly difficult, but when he fulfilled them, then a sword seed would appear in his soul vessel. Though he had left this tomb almost 30 years ago, half of all his knowledge came from there. Most people in this world had heard the legend of Masters Yue Fuyao and Yan Xiangqiu, but they don't know about the second part of this legend. A man who is stronger than those two, and his name is Mo Gulu. The main character was surprised at what he heard. The old man replied that he had gotten it right, and although it was actually not even one person, but as many as three. His older brother Mo Chengzi, brother Gu Minyan, and the protagonist asked excitedly that he was the third. The old man grinned happily and replied that he was not one of that legendary number. Zhu Han forgot to thank Liu Chenhan for his teachings, and the latter kneeled down in front of him. The old man replied that he shouldn't get too excited because the great sword evolution required a lot of internal energy. But his Asura technique didn't develop it at all, and if he tried to use the evolution now, he would earn himself internal injuries. The protagonist was upset at what he heard, because he was only lucky enough to learn such a great sword technique, but he can't use it. The old man replied that although he had been forced by circumstances to pass on the art to him, he was now considered his full-fledged pupil. But that's just lip service. So soon that couple will spread rumors about his injury, so that the road ahead will only become more difficult, and therefore the guy should leave him so that he does not die with him. The protagonist replied that he had already promised the older man that he would help him when times got tough in his life, especially since he has no goals other than enmity with the clan, and there's no way he'd leave the old man on his journey. The old man laughed and asked the boy if he even knew his next destination. Zhu Han asked him to reveal his secret. They are heading to the Daiwan Mountains in Yuzhou. It is October of the 17th year of the Tianyuan era. This is the city of Kujing near the border of Yuzhou province. The little girl was excited about the snow that fell in the yard. The mysterious man questioned the gentleman. He had been living in their tavern for a month and had been sitting here every day waiting for someone. He wanted to find out who he had been waiting for such a long time. A gray-haired grandfather with a long beard sat holding hot tea. He replied that he had been waiting for this one. Liu Changhai and Zhu Han entered the tavern. The old man cheerfully called out to his acquaintance and apologized for the slight delay. The tea old man got angry and said that he was only a month late. Qianhai replied that he shouldn't grumble, for all sorts of things happen in life. As an apology, he would fulfill one of his requests. He replied irritably that he had only one wish, and that was for Qianhai to die as soon as possible, and that he should not let his eyes see the old man. He only laughed and told him to think of something else. Sankai asked the waiter to bring them wine and something to eat. He politely accepted their order, but the old man with the tea got angry with him. The protagonist realized that they seemed to be old buddies. He turned to the elder and introduced himself to him. He replied that he should not stand and sat down with them. The elder realized that the kid wasn't so bad, but Sankai didn't like that he was being too nice to him. The gray-haired tea drinker asked his friend, why did he come to him again? What was the reason he had walked so far? He asked in return to do the impossible, to have him put the guy's arm back on. The main character was surprised. Is it really possible to do such a thing? The old man replied that anyone could not do such a thing, but fortunately the head of Tian's manor was not an ordinary person. In front of them sat the head of Tangxi Manor, who was fixing his long goatee. Tian's manor was once the second most powerful manor in the entire empire. However, with the arrival of the new emperor, he was left with only a dim shadow of his former greatness, which can't be said about the head of the estate. However, the old man has some interesting acquaintances. The head of the manor questioned, does he want the boy's arm reattached? He could do it, but he wondered where the demonic energy in his body came from. Liu Chenhai replied that what did he expect from a kid who was a former pawn of the infernal Asura clan? He practiced the Asura technique. That was why he had such a powerful flow of demonic energy. The tea lover replied that then even with two hands, he wouldn't be able to practice the sword evolution technique. Chanhai replied that he knew about it, and that was why he was going to go to the Daiwan Mountains. The head of the manor was shocked by what he heard. It's not like he wants to. The old man replied that his elder brother guarded the tomb of the sword there. The middle brother guarded the gateway to it, and he had been wandering aimlessly through the world for 30 years, so it was necessary to know and honor. The tea old man replied that as long as he himself wished to do so, then he would be gladly accepted at any time. He reproached him for speaking as if there was something good in it. He does not go to such a faraway place of his own volition. It is his duty. The head of the manor was greatly surprised. That can't be right. Does he want to give him that hand? The old man asked the man to keep his voice down, not to yell all over the tavern about it. They didn't want any more people listening to their conversation. The head of the manor replied that even if he got him that hand, his skills alone wouldn't be enough. They would still need a couple of rare plants from Xuanhai Peak of Linglong Pavilion, and they were currently cooperating with the imperial court, and you couldn't get a single blade of grass from them. Xuanhai was surprised, of course, so he suggested that he take the boy as an apprentice to teach him everything he knows and let him get the necessary herb himself since he needs a hand. The protagonist was surprised at his words. The old man got mad at the guy and told him to call him master. He ordered him to call him his master without delay. The one knelt down and called him his master. The head of the manor replied coldly for the man to get up from the ground. Liu Qianhai only laughed heavily in response. Zhuhan was greatly surprised from the old man's words and action. The long-awaited moment finally arrived. The waiter served them a lot of stuff. Daikon radish, fried meat, omurisu, curry, and most importantly, roasted duck and sauce. It was so delicious. The old man told the protagonist not to be petty and to take whatever he wanted and as much as he wanted. It's called manners. The next day, the heroes traveled further on their journey. Poor cat. She's already had so many owners as a result. Now she's left in the hands of a gray-bearded old man. Zhuhan asked the old man that the sword he was carrying for him was that legendary sword. The man nodded affirmatively. The protagonist asked him, did he steal it from the southern sword tomb? He nodded positively again. Zhuhan was very much surprised. Why did he then run away and betray his native sect? What are they going to the Dayuan Mountains for? He had so many questions and no answers. The heroes have arrived at their destination. These are the Dayuan Mountains, replied the old man. A strong blizzard blew into Qianhai's face that he tried to fight off the strong wind flow with his hand. The old man heard something. He immediately pulled out his blade. He replied that he should always have his sword with him, for the number of his defeats would be noticeably reduced if he did so. The protagonist realized that he had not taken his sword with him when he went to fight Yue Fuyao. The old man got into an attacking stance. He asked Zhuhan if he would accept his new hand or not. He replied that he would never dare to reject the hand that had been won for him by an elder. Liu Qianhai shouted with delight. He jumped over a huge ravine to the other half of the earth. What a grandfather. His joints may be old, but he still has his skills. The main character's jaw nearly dropped from such an unexpected stunt. He yelled for the old man to wait for him, but he crashed into a magical barrier. He didn't expect that such a thing was even possible. Then how did Qianhai get to the other half of the earth through this barrier? Qianhai shouted into the air that a renegade disciple from the 39th generation of the Southern China Sword Tomb was requesting an audience with the Lord. The echoes echoed throughout the entire mountain plateau. His scream could be heard from miles away. Some devilish spirit woke up to that scream. Has it been 300 years already? In front of the old man stood a devil in demonic garb. The Southern China Sword Tomb had sent a person at the immortal vessel stage to break the seal that restrained him. The devil became indignant. Wasn't his name already forgotten? Liu Qianhai replied that he must be joking. After all, no one would dare to forget his name, and his ancestors had ordered him to guard and restrain the overlord for 300 years. His life was coming to an end, and cultivation was inferior to his ancestors. But still, he wanted to give it a try. He asked the old man, why did he desire it so much? The old man asked him, would he dare to make a wager with him? Tom became curious and asked, what was he offering him in return? The old man replied that if he was unfortunate enough to die, he would assure him that no one would be able to enter the Dayuan Mountains for 10 years. But will he be able to get out of here in 10 years? That would depend on his luck. If he happens to win, he will ask to borrow his hand. The protagonist was shocked. Does the old man want to ask him for the hand of demons? The devil laughed indignantly. Did he seriously want to take his hand? The old man repeated his words again. Would the Lord dare to make a wager with him? This time, he raised his blade against him. The devil responded by agreeing to the bargain. Over the other half of the plateau where the magic barrier was raised, some sort of red magic dome rose up. The devil was doing his magic at the time. The old man summoned Xingtian, the giant whose head had been cut off by Emperor Huangdi, but Xingtian did not give up, creating not a mouth from his navel, but eyes from his nipples. The devil and Liu Qianhai started a battle between themselves. The evil one conjured up red fire. The old man saw that the red fire with which the demon lord was covered was beginning to weaken. The demon wondered if Grandpa had a Qingshan sword. Had he taken it out of the sword tomb and it had already reached such a stage? To hold it back again for 300 years. They even dared to do such a thing. The old man replied to the demon that how could he present him with the humble fruit of his efforts, having nothing in store. The devil pounced on the old man in response. A huge battle broke out between them. The ground beneath the demon even began to crack, and he moved at the speed of light. The old man's hand began to suddenly mutate. The devil was surprised at this turn of events. The old man parried the demon's blows as if nothing had happened. Liu Chanhai replied that he was in Kunlun to defeat those creatures, and he definitely needed that sword. But he had overestimated himself. He couldn't contain the terrifying power of the sword. The devil realized that's why he wanted his hand, and with the demon's powers he was able to control the sword? Or is the old man betting on the youngster who stood at the other end of the edge? The old man swung his blade and said that he didn't want to impose the fate of this sword on anyone at all, and he was just giving him one skill, and whether he would use it after his death or not was of no concern to him. The devil replied that he wanted his hand, but he wouldn't get it using only his mouth. The old man nodded to him in agreement. He shouted to the protagonist to watch this action carefully, for this was the last technique he would teach him. The protagonist was stunned to see the mighty power of the old man. Thoth began to run his fingers over the runic hieroglyphics that were on the blade. Liu Chenhai had activated the power of the heavenly Tao. He stepped his foot on the flower that was created by his power. The old man cast a sword-spreading spell. The devil was shocked at what he had just seen. How is it even possible for this to happen? He had the level of a celestial. Liu Chenhai replied that in this sword position, if the 7 lotus petals bloomed, it would signify the complete perfection of the sword art, a breakthrough from the immortal vessel stage to the celestial stage. And also the old man replied that the practitioner must give his life in order to make the lotus bloom. The protagonist was horrified by his words. Does he really want to give his life in exchange for the hand of the devil? The old man attacked the demon with all the strength he could only use. He attacked the devil with a heavenly lotus flower attack. The demon lord was shocked by this. Nothing could be seen around. The main character was blinded because of Liu Qianhai's attack. Tears came to the boy's eyes. Did the older man give his life for him? He saw the old man's sword fly aside. The blade stabbed into the ground, but the old man was nowhere to be seen. This was a sword that Shu Han would not forget for the rest of his life. A month later, Liu Qianhai's old buddy appeared in the mountains. He was holding an umbrella in one hand, and little Zhuan was sitting on his other shoulder. The kid was coming back to him completely depressed. The head of the manor was glad that the one had returned to him. Shu Han held the devil's hand in his hand, but at what cost to him? The protagonist looked down with a blank stare and couldn't even say anything in response because he was completely shattered from losing his mentor. He asked the old man, that hand, what would it ultimately signify to him? The one replied that it was a clue, that it was a ladder to heaven, and of course, it could just as well be a chain that would hold him in the abyss. The main character tearfully asked, what about him? Who is he? They looked up to the sky and saw Liu Qianhai's spirit there, which was the size of huge mountains. The old man replied that the one was a clear spring on a hot day, a sturdy pine tree in the snow, a long-time traveler, and a perfect sage. It was the 18th year of the Tanyuan era, August. Then the events unfolded in the city of Chang'an. The mysterious man congratulated Ho and wished his daughter to go to Linlong Pavilion as soon as possible, successfully complete her training there, and return home again. The other replied that Zhou would then have one more heavenly stage cultivator. Hao thanked them for such words. Ho denotes the hereditary title of nobility in ancient China. It is the second of the 5 ranks of nobility. He replied to his wife that she had done a good job today, and she replied that she was so happy that they had been so lucky. She replied to him that he had missed the food. The protagonist was walking through the city, carrying little Zhuan on his shoulder, and he was already with the devil's hand sewn on. Hao was confused to see him in front of him. He ordered his servant to fetch today's leftovers and give them to him. The protagonist was outraged and replied that he was not a beggar at all. He didn't understand what they wanted him to do. He got indignant and replied to the kid that why is he doing it then? He knows what this place is, doesn't he? Zhuhan told him to take the letter and see what it said, and then he would understand. Thoth snatched the letter from his hands and began to read it. He read something apparently important in it. Hao apologized to the protagonist for being disrespectful. He started apologizing to him a bunch of times and invited him to come inside. It was incomprehensible. Why did Zhuhan make Hu Ningguo afraid? Perhaps because that old man had previously had something to do with this hoe and a few years had passed, Shuhan had become a high-ranking official? He came to greet his subordinates? Who did he become in the meantime? That night, the protagonist and Hao sat in his manor. He began to read the letter from Shuhan. He asked the protagonist, "Where is his teacher after all?" The one replied that he had died during the battle. Hao couldn't believe what he said. The boy replied that the old man had said it was up to him whether he believed it or not, and whether he died or not was up to him. Ningo asked, meaning that he was the only one who knew about the letter? The protagonist replied that no, now he knows about him too. Hao asked if he came alone or with someone else. There were many high-ranked masters beside the teacher. Didn't anyone escort him here? Shuhan replied that only sheep and cows like to be in a herd, but tigers and leopards are much more comfortable being alone. The master of the manor was surprised at such words of his. Shuhan asked him, does he really want to kill him? Would he dare to raise his hand against him? There was an awkward silence between them. Hao didn't know what to say. After thinking about the answer, he said that he was grateful to the teacher and he, Ye Chengtai, is not some kind of hero, but still does not want to repay good for evil, and that if he leaves now, he will pretend that he never saw him or this letter. The protagonist asked with a snide smirk, what would happen if he disobeyed him and didn't go anywhere? The one responded by raising his hand that was already preparing a magic spell and asked if the one thought he wouldn't dare to kill him. He approached Shuhan's face with his hand, but he didn't care about such antics from him. Someone called out to Chengtai, calling him father. He quickly canceled the fire spell and brushed his hand away from the protagonist's face. Hao tried to clear the fiery flashes from the air as quickly as possible, waving his hand left and right in quick movements. The daughter asked her father, why did he put out the candles in the middle of the night? He replied that he had accidentally extinguished them. The daughter did not believe this so easily. She asked, who was sitting in front of him? Who was this guest? Shuhan introduced himself to her and replied that he was happy to see her. The protagonist introduced himself as the guard who would be responsible for escorting her to the Linlun Pavilion. Both father and daughter were shocked to hear from the guy. Shuhan said he came with a letter of recommendation from an old friend of Hu, and Hu had already approved it too, so maybe we should show this letter to his daughter. The latter replied that it was all for naught. She pondered his words. She replied that since that was the case, she relied on him. He thanked her for her trust. Chengtai replied that he should let his daughter Hongjian go down first, and she obediently agreed. Hao and the protagonist are alone again. The daughter has already left. Chengtai got angry and asked, did the kid think he was so easy to fool? Toth asked in response that Hao really thought Mrs. Tripp would go without incident. Hao wondered what the other man meant. The protagonist replied that back in the days when His Majesty secretly ordered Zhu Xian, the head of the Long Night Department, to exterminate the entire Mu family for treason, it seemed to outsiders that the emperor was afraid of the Mu family. But the one knows very well that the emperor is actually afraid of the house of Tianzi. His wife, on the other hand, is a member of the Mu royal family clan, and Zhu Xian has suppressed the Mu clan for many years and asked the Lord. The one stood there and anxiously listened to Shuhan's speech. The protagonist asked, did he really think that Zhu Xian would let Madame go to Linlong Pavilion and wait for her to return from her studies to make amends for the damage that had been done to his family? An irritated Hu replied that if the order of the Long Night was not trustworthy, then was Tian's manor trustworthy? Did the master trusted to send him to Linlong Pavilion with the intention of using his hand to strike? The protagonist interrogated the man, not understanding what he was talking about. Shuhan replied that the Lord had misunderstood him and that he could not represent Tianhe Manor. He only represented Shuhan. Hao asked, is there any difference in that? Shuhan replied that all he needed to know was that the young lady needed to go to Linlong, and it just so happened that he did too, and he had no choice but to give the okay, so the Lord could trust him completely, and that would be enough. The one looked at the kid with a worried look. He sighed heavily and said that he understood him, and that he would ask the man to arrange a place to sleep outside. Shuhan accepted his words, and he said that then they would wait again for news from the Lord. From the next room, Hao was called by his wife, and he turned around, ready to hear her out. She replied to him that she had been nothing but a burden to him and Hongjian all these years. He hugged her and told her not to think about it too much. After all, the emperor's family had been betrayed and died for nothing, and even though he was weak, he still wouldn't become Zhu Xian's accomplice under any circumstances. Since he wouldn't let them go until now, he would just fight him to keep Hongjian unharmed. Meanwhile, Zhuhan and Little Zhuan walked around the illuminated city. The protagonist said that, as always, Chang'an was bustling with life at night. The protagonist noticed someone chasing someone else and yelled at the top of his voice for them to try and catch up to him. He shouted for his teacher to help him. He was addressing Zhuhan, apparently. The angry men shouted at him and asked him what he wanted to run away without paying for his drink. A moneyless drunk asked Zhuhan to help him with his problem, but he didn't defend him and instead tripped him up and he went down. He grabbed the protagonist by the vest. The drunken poor fellow replied that he was waiting for him and these people were bothering him. He tearfully begged him to help him deal with them. The enraged men realized that Zhuhan was with him and wanted to slap his face on top of that. The protagonist didn't tolerate such insolence and asked them, what did they just now dare to slur at him? Zhuhan was also not thrilled that his master was being slung mud now. The drunken men were startled at what they heard. They knelt down and began to beg for forgiveness and said that they did not recognize him and attacked him, so they asked that he spare them. Zhuhan irritatedly told them to get out of sight. They were all bruised and had a lot of bumps on their heads and thanked him for the favor. The protagonist has forgotten all about the initiator of this rebellion. He's already gone. Zhuhan thought about the fact that he was now in the Diamond Empire, and he could certainly escape, and he didn't notice it. This Chang'an was really not easy. The initiator of this conflict meanwhile thanked Zhuhan for refilling his wallet. The protagonist was joined by Hao. He told him that he thought something serious had happened, but it turned out to be a petty situation because Zhuhan just didn't have any money with him for dinner. Zhuhan replied that he originally didn't want to bother him. Chengtai thought about the fact that he was a master's apprentice, and if he was in trouble, how could he not come in person? The protagonist replied that the one was generous, and he would remember his kindness for the rest of his life. But Chengtai denied his words and replied that it was just food and he had nothing to worry about. Zhuhan looked at Hao with a serious expression. Chengtai was concerned and realized that this guy was serious. However, he was different from the others. He replied to the protagonist that if he handed over Hongjian to him, could he really be trusted? Zhuhan replied that there was no one in this world to trust except himself. Chengtai pondered his words seriously. The protagonist said that the master could trust him since he was seriously ill and needed to be admitted to the Linlun Pavilion to be cured, but without the master, he couldn't enter even if he had 1,000 skills. So he insisted that he had handed over the lady to him and that protection would be paramount for him. The devil hand that was sewn onto Zhuhan suddenly went wild. It began to exude devilish energy. At this time, little Zhuan was lying on the protagonist's lap and purring from the pleasure she was getting from being on them. She stood up and stretched lazily. Zhuhan realized that something was going wrong with him. His hand continued to emit the strongest devilish energy. The main character was lying on the couch near the head of the manor. The devil's hand had already reached its limit and began to exude even more devilish energy. The old man replied that everything was ready, that the dark power in the demon ruler's hand was already huge, and later he would be able to absorb the demon power without hesitation and would be able to control it calmly. The protagonist was lying down from the raging pain that came from that devilish limb. He thanked the old man for his care and guidance. But suddenly, his hand began to move very quickly on its own. She punched Zhuhan right in the jaw. The old man replied that it was not easy to control the demonic hand, so he needed to get used to it first. Wiping the blood from his nose, the protagonist replied that he understood him and would try to copulate her as his own. The old man said that using hand strength to induce body recovery had no side effects, but about internal techniques. For example, the great derivative sword skill. He should go to the pavilion and find some medicinal herbs. Zhuhan thought about the fact that he had to go to the pavilion. Some strange voice came from the street. The mistress ordered someone to get out of the way. Someone told her not to do that because the mistress had ordered her to do so, but she did not obey him. Hearing that she was approaching the protagonist, he wrapped his arm around her so as not to show her his secret. Someone tried to stop her, but it was all to no avail. Zhuhan was surprised by this. She was heading towards the main character, holding a katana in her hands. The one didn't realize what she wanted to do to him. She prepared for the fact that she was going to attack the protagonist. Zhuhan didn't expect this and questioned her. What was she trying to tell him? The latter replied grudgingly, saying that didn't he himself realize what she wanted to tell him? The lady put the blade to Zhuhan's throat to get some kind of response from him. She asked him if he knew what he had done. A serious battle had broken out in the courtyard, judging from the dust that rose in the air. Had Zhuhan done something so serious that Madame was even willing to kill him now? The protagonist stood in the puffs of smoke, wondering what he should do next. Madame was surprised at what Zhuhan had just done. He grabbed her blade with his coiled demonic hand. She didn't know what to do next. She begged him to let go of her sword, but Zhuhan snatches the blade from her hands and takes it for himself. He grabbed the mistress by the throat. Hongjan flew into the air like a feather. Zhuhan replied that he never provoked her, but she snatched the sword without a word, and if it was anyone else. She was only greedily gulping air at this point. The protagonist continued that she was the Lord's dear daughter, and he wouldn't dare to kill her. However, the life of the Lord is also Zhuhan's life, and if she were to pull something like this again next time, let her not blame him for being ruthless. He tossed it to the ground like chewed gum that had been wrapped in a wrapper. The protagonist also added that if she didn't need anything else, he would go and not see her off. Hongjan replied to him that even if she were to die, there was no way she would let him succeed. But the protagonist was not hurt by these words, and he replied that if she had repeated them, wiping away the tears in her eyes, he might have been a little more frightened. Hongjan was hysterically angry at Zhuhan. Toth walked away from her, closing the doors behind him. He didn't understand what was this even about now? So why was he not being allowed to go to the Linglong Pavilion in peace? Someone knocked on Zhuhan's door while he was drinking tea. He was annoyed and didn't understand what they wanted from him again. The servant replied that the feast had begun, and the master asked him to invite him to join him. The protagonist irritably opened the door and asked, "What is this feast?" He asked the servant to tell him that he had business to attend to and would not be able to come. The servant replied that he should come to him at any cost. The servant asked him fearfully if he would follow him after all. Zhuhan agreed to his request. In Hao's chambers, there were many people sitting at tables with various feasts and sheets of paper. The protagonist came with his servant to Cheng Tai's house for a feast. The servant showed Zhuhan where to sit. He was puzzled. What did they want him to do to sit in the first place next to his master? He wondered what he was trying to accomplish. Cheng Tai told him to take a seat. Zhuhan silently sat down and began to listen to what Hao would say next. The girls were whispering amongst themselves about something. Zhuhan was uncomfortable that his men were starting to discuss so zealously. The men in the audience were not thrilled with his presence. Zhuhan looked surprised at some influential person. The one gawked at the protagonist with great indignation. Cheng Tai thundered that he was sorry to bother everyone again today, but he had a very important announcement to make. He pointed his hand at Zhuhan and introduced him as the son of his old friend, and from today, he is the fiancé of his daughter Ye Hongjan. The protagonist was shocked by what he heard, so that's why Mistress was so angry with him. The guests were shocked to hear the words from Cheng Tai. But at this moment, Zhuhan was no less surprised than them. The main character was now unsurprised that Ye Hongjan had come to kill him. This old fox originally wanted to use the Linlong Pavilion to save his life, but the Order of the Long Night persistently pursued them, and he chose the Heavenly Strategy Mansion. Hao was going to use Zhuhan to protect his daughter. Smart move. Cheng Tai suggested that everyone toast the groom, but some kid interrupted him and asked him indignantly why he wanted to marry the main character specifically. Zhuhan questioned the one, "Who is he and why does he arise?" The one introduced himself, he is Lin Kai. The protagonist grudgingly replied that this was the first time he had heard of such a name. Hao replied to the magnanimous nephew Xu that he was the son of the great commander Lin Li of the Imperial Department of the Long Night Division, and that the latter did not know about many things and that the department was very powerful, so he needed to choose his words carefully. The Long Night Division is so powerful that even princes and lords have to deal with it carefully, and if Zhuhan responds to Lin Kai's provocation, it will tie Ningguo Mansion to the House of Heavenly Strategy. But if he doesn't say anything now, he won't be able to go to Linlin Pavilion. The protagonist asked, "Who is Mr. Lin to say that he is unworthy to take Hongjan as his wife?" The one shouted that Hongjan was Mr. Ningguo's daughter, a disciple of Pavilion Elder Lin Long, who had outstanding talent, and the one as a country bumpkin couldn't be worthy of marrying her. Zhuhan is not a lazy man and replied that the marriage between him and Hongjan was ordered by the Lord, and although he comes from a poor family, he is a man of noble behavior and a descendant of the late Lord Liu Chenhai. The Lord had rightly wed his daughter in remembrance of that good relationship, so who is he to tell him what to do? Or maybe his Lin family doesn't even know of the existence of the great Lord. Lin Kai angrily replied, revealing the chatterer's true face. "He attacked Zhuhan!" All the guests were dumbfounded at this turn of events. Even Hao didn't know what to say to him for such insolence. He already wanted to kill the protagonist for saying such words no matter what. Zhuhan went into berserk mode. He was going to hit it with his demonic power. The protagonist fended off a punch from a rabid insolent man. Zhuhan throws Lin Kai to the end of the hall with his immense strength. That one flew like snot onto the ground, which was blown out with furious force. He slammed into the column from such a powerful blow. The protagonist said that Mr. Lin had succumbed to him. He was knocked out by his powerful right punch. As they say, the left is a crowning left and the right is a funeral right. All the girls squealed with delight that Zhuhan was so strong, and men on the contrary shunned him and didn't want to get involved with him. Zhuhan replied that the firefly illuminates the sun and moon, and the ant crosses the sea, and let that one not be a frog at the bottom of a well. Let him not be an insignificant young man. Mr. Ho didn't even know what to answer him after saying and acting like this. He realized that those words were meant for him. How was displeased with such words from the protagonist? Chung Tai's wife turned to him, but he didn't react in any way. Then she called out to him again to get his attention. Thoth woke up from his thoughts and realized that his spouse had come to see him. She answered him that the Department of Long Night relies on His Majesty, and today Lin Li's son was seriously injured in the palace and she is afraid that Hao understands this concern and said that Zhu Xian has always been hostile towards them because of the incident in Mu Palace. Now that Hong Zhan has entered the Linglong Pavilion, they have become an even bigger thorn in Zhu Xian's eyes. She didn't understand. What did her husband mean? The one said that since they are not destined to win the confidence of the Long Night Department, why don't they resolutely get on the chariot of the House of Heavenly Strategy? After years of hibernation, the master unexpectedly sends his apprentice to Chang'an. And if his hunch is correct, the counterattack of the House of Heavenly Strategy is about to begin. Night reigned in the courtyard. The bright moon was shining through all the windows of the manor. In the meantime, the protagonist was in full training, honing his mastery of demonic energy. Zhuhan practiced wielding the sword energy that Liu Qianghai had left him as an inheritance gift. He moved so fast that he seemed to be creating shadow copies of himself. He was practicing his shadow jutsu. The protagonist heard the main gate to the palace creak open. Someone is approaching him. It was Hong Zhan. She was standing on him and looking at him with a hostile stare. The one turned to her with a question. What did she want from him? She asked him if her future spouse would invite her into the house. Toth replied that he would invite him. They sat down at a table together. Zhuhan asked her, what did she need at this late hour? She asked him unhappily, what had gotten into her father's head that he had agreed to the engagement? Zhuhan said that the master remembered an old friendship and, pitying his loneliness, gave the lady in marriage, and previously he knew nothing about it at all. Pouring some green tea from the kettle, she interrogated him. What kind of relationship do they have with their mentor after all? Zhuhan interjected. What does she mean? She said her father had always loved her, and how could he marry him off to a descendant of an old friend he had never met and never asked her opinion? He must have some personal reason, and she came here this morning to check it out. Zhuhan grudgingly replied that her anger didn't seem like a simple challenge. Hong Zhan said that she had the intention to kill him before. Her Ye family was inextricably linked to the Mu Palace, and now when she entered the Linlong Pavilion, then she would definitely cause the fear of the Long Night Division. At the time, she had thought he was a means sent by the Long Night Department to keep her down, but after today's meeting, she had changed her mind. The protagonist interjected, why all of a sudden? She replied that it was all about the smell of fallen pear blossoms. Zhuhan was surprised. After all, it was one of the scents of the medicinal bath that the master had distributed for him earlier to suppress the strange movement of the demonic hand. It had been half a month since the last bath, and she still smelled the scent. Hongjun replied that her mentor had told her that the fallen pear flower was warm in character and could combine with many kinds of herbs. So it was often used, and she had caught that scent when they fought with each other. Later, she thought that her father would not have compromised with the Long Night Department, even if he had suffered more humiliation, and that it might not be the Long Night Department, but the Heavenly Strategy House behind Zhuhan. Zhuhan said that he was indeed the master's disciple and asked her, what was she going to do now that she had heard of this news? Hongjian was shocked at what she heard. She didn't understand. How could the mentor take him on as an apprentice? The protagonist replied that she would have to go and ask the old man himself how he liked him. Hongjian asked, then where is the mentor now? Zhuhan said that he had died. She was horrified at the news. The protagonist coldly replied that when you are old, you are doomed to perish. She just silently continued to sip her tea further. Hongjian asked him a question. He needs to go to Linlong Pavilion, right? Zhuhan agreed. She agreed to his request, but still about the engagement. Zhuhan said that she should not worry, and when the matter was over, she would report to the Lord and give up the marriage contract. Hongjian said in disbelief that the one would still keep his promise. She left Zhuhan's courtyard for her own place. The protagonist was interested in her, She is 17 years old and has such intelligence. This gloomy and turbulent environment in Chanyang made her become strong. Next, the events took place in the Hu Palace. Chengtai told everyone present that young warrior Tong had traveled a difficult path from Linlong Pavilion. Tong replied that the master was very kind to him, and that little sister Ye was the disciple that Elder Sikong had chosen, so Linlong Pavilion should keep her safe and sound. Chengtai said, accompanied by a young and talented warrior, of course no brigands would dare to attack. Hongzhan, Zhuhan, and Little Zhuan walked in for an audience with them. Tong was surprised to see them together. He said he was happy to see little sister Yi and that they hadn't seen each other, and it had been months since they last saw each other. Hongzhan replied that she welcomed Big Brother Tong, and so did all the big brothers and sisters. Tong said that she was very kind and said that they were leaving tomorrow. Was she ready? If she didn't understand anything, let her come at any time and ask. She understood and thanked him. Hao replied that in order to escort his daughter, their pavilion had made great efforts, and he was truly sorry, so he invited the young warrior to go with them to share some of the load. The curly-haired boy asked, "Does the Lord not trust the Linlun Pavilion? With the presence of his brother Tong and the name of Linlun Pavilion, who would dare to make any move against them?" Luo Yin's brother Luo Yin replied not to talk nonsense. After all, this was his future father-in-law. Tong apologized for his lack of discipline, and so was going to ask the Lord to introduce the guard he had hired to them. Zhuhan showed himself to him, saying that he was the same guard that Mr. Hu had hired. Chengtai said that the protagonist was a descendant of his old friend, and he asked Zhuhan to go with them to Linlong Pavilion, firstly so that he could guard Hongzhan, and secondly so that he could start studying hard. Luo Yin asked, what was so special about this brother that he was so valued by the master? Zhuhan replied instead that it was nothing that special. He was just Hongzhan's future husband, and that was all. Tong was shocked. Husband? What husband? Meanwhile, she only continued to stand there embarrassed in front of her brother. Tong was shocked. Her facial expression said that she was very happy with the decision. He passed out from shock. Everyone tried to wake him up, but to no avail. Everyone looked unhappily at the protagonist that he, the creep, was already picking on their sister. Zhuhan realized that this trip was definitely not going to be a peaceful one. It was late at night. The birds were flying somewhere and there was silence all around. Zhuhan couldn't sleep. He heard someone coming to see him. He went into the courtyard and asked, who is it that has come to him so late? It was Hongzhan. The protagonist was greatly surprised to see her in front of him. She told him to follow her. She would take him to a place. The protagonist didn't understand. What did she want from him? Hongzhan just silently walked towards the gate. Zhuhan didn't know what to even answer her. He ran after her to see where she would lead him. Hongzhan and Zhuhan were walking down the street. The protagonist is worried. Does this woman deliberately choose a backwoods path, and is she going to kill her husband? The girl replied that they had already arrived at their destination. They arrived at some house where there were magnificent huge statues with lions. The protagonist asked in surprise, is this really the home of heavenly strategy? Hongzhan said that there was someone who wanted to meet him before he left Chang'an. They went inside the room. Zhuhan recalled that once the center of power in the entire Great Zhou, now the heavenly strategy mansion was abandoned. They were approaching the doors where it was light inside the room. Hongzhan told the protagonist that he was expected there and let him step inside the room. Zhuhan was alarmed by this, for he didn't know who was waiting for him inside. He opened the doors of the room and prepared to meet the mysterious man who was so eager to see them. A dagger flew at the protagonist while he was still trying to open the doors. But Zhuhan was expecting such a move and he repelled it. The mysterious stranger replied that he was expecting him to come. The protagonist didn't understand what it was all about. The strange man with a black beard looked at Zhuhan with a sad look, as if he expected something more than this from him. The main character said that His Excellency has such a strange way of greeting people. The man in the black kimono pointed to a place where Zhuhan could sit down and invited him to listen to what the man would tell him next. He asked Zhuhan how his old man had been lately, for there had been no news from him for a long time. The protagonist replied that the old man had died in a duel. The one smiled sadly in response and looked down at the floor. The man wanted to pull something out of his sinus and give it to Zhuhan. He handed him a green dragon amulet that was wrapped with a red ribbon. Zhuhan didn't expect such a gift from His Excellency. The one replied that it was Liu Chanhai's fate talisman, and when the jade pendant was broken, it would be the day his fate would come to an end. Zhuhan remembered that the old man had once given him a similar pendant, and he began to pull it out from behind his sinus. He gave this amulet to the man. His Excellency asked the protagonist if the old man had left after all. In response, he murmured in agreement. The man turned to Kunlun, the land of the immortals. What happened there in the end? Jian Hailu had left and the old man had to go as well, and all he had to do was sit here idly. Zhuhan said that in addition, the old man was speaking slurred, and the latter was just afraid that it was not the right time to travel. He also questioned the man. Did he only want to meet him because of that, or was there some other reason? The man said that he had heard from Hong Jian that the old man had accepted him as a disciple. Was it true or was it a lie? Zhuhan said it was true. Then the one asked the question, did he need to go to the Linglong Pavilion to heal his meridians or his arm? Zhuhan was surprised from such unexpected questions. His Excellency asked, where will the protagonist go after he heals his wounds? The protagonist replied that he did not know yet. The man replied that for 3 more years he would be able to protect the House of Heaven strategy for him. But Zhuhan wanted to object to this, except that the man didn't let him prove it and told him to be sure to come back. He added that after 3 years, whatever he decides, he hopes Zhuhan will meet him again. The protagonist closed the doors of the man's house and moved on. He thought about the hand that was left to him by Lu Changhai, the key to solving mysteries, the ladder to becoming a great man, as well as the chains that imprisoned him in the abyss. But what about his? What was the status that gave him as a master's disciple? Zhuhan along with Hong Jian walked back. The protagonist asked, who exactly is this person? She replied that his name was Yuan Gilong. Then Zhuhan remembered that Yuan Gilong was a great desert king. It was daytime. It was very bright outside. The sun was shining through the leaves of the trees. The disciples of Linlun Pavilion arrived at their destination. Luo Yin said that Hong Jian's sister is so outstanding, and Mr. Ningguo took her and paired her with the village kid. The girl beside him said that there was no objection from Hong Jian's side either, which was somehow very suspicious. Tong shouted for them to shut up. He said threateningly that if he knew his place, he would refuse the engagement. But if not, he would see to it that he did not get away with it so easily. The maiden felt uncomfortable at his words. The entire entourage walked inside the palace, and the main character along with little Zhuan walked beside them. Tong happily called out to Zhuhan and Hong Jian and asked if they were ready and that it was time for them to set off. Sis replied that they are fully ready to ship. Hong Jian said goodbye to her father and mother. The protagonist also said goodbye to them, bowing out with all honors. Hong Jian leisurely moved inside the carriage. Tong replied to the protagonist that there are differences between men and women and that this cart was prepared for Hong Jian and his 2 sisters. He pointed his hand at the other wagon where Luo Yin was sitting at the wheel, who smiled achidically at the protagonist. Zhuhan apologized and said that the latter was wrong. He went to his wagon to continue on his way. The heroes immediately moved out and left the city. Luo Yin whipped the horses with all his might to make them move as fast as possible. The boy companion replied that Big Brother Tong had reached the Sanyuan realm at a young age and was expected to become a personal disciple in less than a year. The other companion said that he possessed a tremendous talent that was many levels above them. The kid had an idea. He replied that Zhuhan was highly regarded by the Lord and inquired, what level had he already reached? The protagonist replied that he was ashamed to say, but the meridians of his body had been disrupted after a disaster in his childhood, and now he had no inner strength, so he was sure he had only made them laugh with that answer. Both guys were shocked by this response. The ponytailed boy replied that he was very sorry and it was no wonder that he had turned to the Lord's patronage. And also the Lord valued love and righteousness. And surprisingly, he might in the future marry Hong Jian's little sister to that one, though it was a bit. Zhuhan glared angrily at the one in response to such a comment from him. The kid was scared and realized that there was now a dangerous atmosphere in the wagon. He didn't realize what had just happened. Damn it, he was starting to fear him now. Or it could have been an illusion. The kid frightenedly dared to still ask, wasn't he right? The protagonist replied that he really didn't deserve their sister, but it was the Lord's personal order. So if they were dissatisfied with him, they needed to talk to him personally. The one got angry at the protagonist for such impertinence. Zhuhan said that he and he didn't know each other until now, but Brother Meng has been treating him badly since they first met because he thinks he's weak and easily intimidated. Meng was about to pull out his blade and punish Zhuhan, but his brother stopped him and said that you can't do that. The protagonist replied that he understood the fact that Meng loved Hong Jian very much. It was just that Linlong Pavilion was a well-known righteous sect, so instead of ridiculing him, he should have just approached her personally. If she agrees, then he will also do the same good deed and appeal to the Lord with an explanation for canceling the engagement. Both brothers were shocked at his answer. Zhuhan ordered the wagon to stop. He got out of the carriage and approached Yuhan with an important conversation to her. Tong was startled by the fact that the protagonist suddenly stepped straight at him and abruptly slowed down the horses. Meng yelled to the one that he didn't need to talk to her about it. Hongjian looked out of the wagon and wanted to know, after all, what did Yuhan want from her? The protagonist, with a smile on her face, asked her if she had anything to eat. Both Tong and Hongjian were dumbfounded from such an unexpected question. Meng was also very much surprised. He sank his teeth into the poor carriage and replied that Yuhan must be bullying him. The brothers surrounded the Hongjian sister and began to take care of her properly. Someone gave her a taste of some dish, someone gave her water to drink, and meanwhile the main character calmly ate cake sitting near the fire with little Xuan. Tong approached the protagonist and said that in order to keep dear little sister Hongjian safe, he read that it was still necessary for someone to keep watch at night in case of an attack by robbers. Yuhan, chomping at the bit, replied that the one was right and he would definitely cooperate with them. Tong said that they have a responsibility to protect Sister Ye, so they need him to be alert while the rest of them rest and recover in the meantime. How does he feel about that? The protagonist thought that this was his original plan. As it was what he had intended to do. Tong asked with a sneer, "Is Brother Shu afraid of something?" Shuhan replied that it was up to Brother Tong to decide everything. Thoth took him by the shoulder and replied that in that case, "Thank you for your help." It was deep night outside. A crow sat on the branches of leafless trees and cawed at the sky. Everyone around me was lying down and sleeping without a backsleep, having wonderful night dreams. Meanwhile, the protagonist sat by the fire and looked at the amulet he had inherited. In his hands, he held a pendant that had a black dragon engraved on it. He recalled Yuan Gilun's words, telling him to come back to him after 3 years. The protagonist heard a sudden crack of a branch on the ground. Hongjian walked up to him. Yuhan was startled by her sudden appearance in front of him. He asked her, why was the young mistress still awake at this late hour? She replied that it was the first time she was away from home, and because of that, she couldn't sleep. The protagonist took a closer look at the worried Hongjian. Her beautiful face was shining with heavenly light. Yuhan thought in his head that it was just as everyone said about her, an irresistible beauty outshining the moon and flowers. She noticed him staring at her and asked him if she was beautiful. The protagonist didn't know what to say to her. Yuhan embarrassedly replied to her that, didn't she come here late at night just to show off herself? Ta asked, could she not do such a thing in front of him? The protagonist was thrown into a shiver of embarrassment. The latter responded by saying that she was only trying to play a joke on him. Hongjian asked him what he thought. Would they be able to hold the long night department or not? Yuhan replied, doesn't she think they can't? She thundered that although Tong Tiexin is overconfident, but the cultivation of the Sanyun realm is correct. Without a few worthy masters, she is afraid that she won't be able to defeat him. Behind her is Linjin Pavilion, and who will ascend to the immortal realm in the future is Zhou Manor. The protagonist said, looking at Zhou's big rivers and lakes, it's hard to find anyone who dares to go against him. Besides, a surprised Hongjian asked him, besides who? Yuhan replied that besides the Palace of Hell. The palace minions were rapidly running towards them. One of the mercenaries who had a red vein on his forehead. Someone really wanted to kill someone badly. His image became clearly visible. He had huge veins on his forehead, and sharp fangs could be seen from under his black balaclava. Meanwhile, Tong Hu didn't suspect anything. With an embarrassed look, handed a bouquet of flowers to Hongjian, who was just as embarrassed by such a gift. The protagonist walked along with her, holding hands. The heroes did not even suspect that their caravan is waiting for bloodthirsty killers with sharp blades. The brothers stood and withdrew from their sleep. Tong ordered the others to prepare to leave. Hongjian told him that in order to avoid the encounter with the long night department, they should speed up. Tong replied that she was here with him and she was perfectly safe. After all, it is a scenic journey, so she can just enjoy it. In that case, she replied that she would trust her brother's plan. The protagonist stood stone-faced, not even surprised by this decision. Hongjian nodded that she had nothing else to do but trust him. The wagons touched down and they continued on their way. Tong handed his little sister the bouquet, and they glared at each other. Meanwhile, Yuhan led her away, holding her hand. Tong gnawed on the cloth in the bushes, envying him. He ordered the horse to run even faster. He hit it with the whip. Yuhan hit the walls of the carriage from such a sudden acceleration and received a few bumps on his head. While everyone was asleep, the main character was on guard, sitting by the fire. The next day, they set off again in a hurry, and once again, Yuhan got the brunt of Tong's driver. It's been 7 days since it was sent from the palace. Tong said that he was right, that with him, the thieves wouldn't dare to take a single step, and they would be able to reach a Linlong pavilion safely. Hong Jian coldly agreed to his words. She was surreptitiously watching someone ducking down. She was curious and approached Juhan, who was sitting near the fire and warming himself. Meanwhile, the protagonist thought, why didn't the Long Night department do anything about it? Had he miscalculated? It was deep night. The moon was half obscured by dark clouds. Hong Jian heard something. There was some bald mercenary looking at her. She already wanted to take up her sword, but she was interrupted by Juhan. In the darkness, he was unrecognizable, so he responded so as not to lose his head prematurely. Hong Jian was surprised by his appearance. She asked him what had happened to come to her at such a late hour. The protagonist said to let her look outside and see for herself. Waiting for them were the mercenaries who already had their blades at the ready. Are these the people of the Infernal Palace? Juhan replied that they were. Hong Jian began to worry. What should they do? It was urgent to wake everyone up. But the protagonist replied that they couldn't do that now. Since the Hell Palace dared to strike at the foot of the Linlong Pavilion Mountain, it meant that they were completely confident in their strength. And if they were to face them now, they wouldn't even have a chance of winning. Hong Jian stopped while holding her hand and asked Juhan, what was he going to do now? Thoth took her firmly with his demonic hand and said that they need to get out of here as soon as possible. Hong Jian asked, what about the others? They can't just pick them up and leave them like that. She said it was her fault, and if he wanted to go, he could go. She, Hong Jian, is not afraid to die for her brothers. The protagonist replied that they weren't going to die, and she didn't have to worry about them. Juhan signaled to the sleeping Hong Jian brothers that they were being attacked by enemies. They noticed the signal and Tong raised the alarm that enemies were moving in on them. Now Juhan and Hong Jian could escape in peace. She didn't even realize what just happened. The main character said that if she stayed there now, she would only make things worse for her brothers. She asked in surprise, why would she suddenly be a burden to them? Juhan replied, dubbing her to look at their battle equipment. They have the sword of the army of the great Xia dynasty. Tong warned everyone to be careful. The mercenaries often had the Xia dynasty's seven-sword technique. The protagonist replied that it was a battle technique of the Xia army, and according to the rules of the Infernal Palace, if someone sees the face of an Asura during a mission, they are disposed of. Juhan asked in surprise, does he mean to say that they want to frame the great Xia dynasty? The protagonist replied that it is, and if they can't find her, then they will chase after her and let Tong Txin and the others go. After all, someone has to be a witness, so the best solution now is to escape. Juhan stared intently at what was going on behind their backs. The mercenaries were fighting the brothers of Linlun Pavilion at full strength. One of the assassins is about to strike with a blade using demonic eyes and a mark on his forehead. He chopped up one of the wagons. He noticed that they were empty. It was a purple-clothed Asura. With a physical body cultivation no lower than the purple sky level, the martial power was enough to match a cultivator of the Tongyo realm, one of the spheres of the spiritual realm of martial arts. It was no wonder they dared to attack them, sending such a powerful lineup. The demonic Asura was looking at the protagonist. Juhan had noticed that look. Has he been discovered? He took Hong Jian tightly by the arm and shouted that they needed to escape from this massacre as soon as possible. The demonic Asura replied that the target had already escaped. He ordered 3 of his allies to follow him in pursuit and let the rest stay here in full alert to retreat to the stronghold in half an hour. He also told those to remember that none of the people of Linlun Pavilion should die. Those accepted their commander's orders and stood at battle stations in full alert. Hong Jian was already at her limit. She was already very tired of running after the protagonists, but they had to keep going in order to survive. The mercenaries from the Asura clan ran after them. They were chasing the heroes' heels. Just a little more, and they would catch up with them. Hong Jian asked, why after running for so long, they still can't get rid of them? Juhan replied that they had not used their full strength, and they should try to take them instead, which is quite distant from Tong Txin, and then kill the others. This is a tactic used by the Infernal Palace. She asked in surprise, what should they do in such a case then? The protagonist braked hard. He told Hong Jian to run forward. She was shocked at such a sudden order. Juhan began to pull out his sword from its cloth sheath. The mercenaries ran after the protagonist, bearing their blades. Juhan adopted a fighting stance, showing with all his appearance that he would not give up so easily and would not give offense to his soulmate. The mercenaries were shocked by his sinister appearance. The protagonist swung his sword towards the mercenaries. That one pierces the enemy blade, causing it to crack. The enemy mercenary was shocked by such a blow. Juhan breaks through his opponent's defenses with a leg kick. From this sudden combo, the mercenary's sword shattered, splitting into several tiny particles, and the assassin himself flew aside from the powerful kick under his breath. An Asura clan mercenary flies into a tree at top speed. He died instantly from such a powerful blow. The demonic Asura was looming over the chief mercenary. He called the protagonist a warrior with a dead arm. Juhan realized that the matter smelled fried. The demonic Asura had taken Hongjian hostage. Juhan swooped down on his opponent using the power of his demonic arm. He's hitting it with his fist. Mercenaries attacked the protagonist, but Juhan deflects their strike thanks to his blade. Meanwhile, the ringleader stood waiting for the result of the battle. Demonic Asura said that in the entire Great Zhou dynasty, there were very few sects that practiced incorruptible body, besides the Hell Palace. But the kid looks 17 or 18 years old and has such strength. Indeed. Meanwhile, Hongjian pounced on the ringleader with her blade from behind to stab him through and finish him off. But he spotted this attack. He deflects her blow and grabs her arm. He grabbed her shoulder with all his might. The demonic Asura ordered her not to move because she was preventing him from watching the battle. She was shocked at his words. Juhan summoned little Zhuan to help him battle the opponents. Now the protagonist is helped by a little cat. Even though she is small, she is not inferior to the enemy mercenaries. The protagonist shouted at Zhuan to get rid of the enemies. With a fierce gaze and claws ready for battle, she swung at the mercenaries. Her claws were very sharp. They were equal in sharpness to a honed blade. Little Zhuan slits the throat of an enemy mercenary. Meanwhile, the protagonist breaks his opponent's blade and takes him down. Now Zhuhan had reached the enemy ringleader. The protagonist was exuding a powerful demonic energy. He was ready to strike down the demonic Asura. The ringleader replied that he had been wondering which sect had birthed such an outstanding martial artist, but it turned out to be the same sect. He grabbed Hongjian's shoulder with all his might again. The demonic Asura threw her face to the ground with all his might. Hongjian realized that she couldn't even move from such a grip. Demonic Asura asked, "The protagonist is not from Asura, who has gone against the Hell Palace as of late, 17 or 18 years old, and even with a black cat. Who could it be?" Shuhan realized that it was not surprising that he did not make a move right now, which meant that he had guessed his identity and wanted to get information about Liu Changhai. This is immeasurable wealth, and he wants to appropriate it for himself. The protagonist gathered his wits and his strength and prepared for a serious battle. He prepared to attack his opponent as quickly as possible, that the ground began to crack beneath his feet. The demonic Asura saw that the main character's pose was similar. Shield! The protagonist uses a spiritual shield against his opponent. He's running towards his opponent to show him where the crawfish are. Shuhan prepares to deal a serious blow to his opponent with his sword, but he blocks it with one hand and tells Shuhan that his momentum is good, but his fire is still lacking. The protagonist was surprised that the one handled his powerful attack with ease. Demonic Asura strikes back with a powerful left hook, but Shuhan is no stranger. He deflects his blow with his demonic arm. The one hits her with his fist, but the protagonist doesn't care about the blow. It was very loud in the forest. Clouds of smoke rose in the air from such a serious fight between the demonic Asura and Shuhan. Still, the enemy managed to break through the protagonist's defenses. He flies into a tree at top speed. But suddenly, the demonic Asura's fist was all shredded. It began to bleed. The demonic leader thought that this hand was somehow strange. Shuhan was seriously injured. He falls to the ground with his partner Zhuan. The protagonist is not going to give up so easily, so he gets up and continues to fight for his and Hongjian's lives together. The blade passed near the demonic Asura's neck within a millimeter. The one grabs the protagonist by the arm. He responded to him by only having to dodge that strange hand. But that was not the case. Little Zhuan wasn't about to leave her master in trouble. She rushed towards the enemy with a ferocious gaze. The cat pounces on the demonic Asura. "Here's the chance. As long as little Zhuan gives it to us, we should take it." Shuhan lands a tremendous punch to the nose with his demonic arm. The demonic Asura flies aside from such a super powerful hook. He's landing hard on the ground. The protagonist realizes that such a blow is not enough for him, so more must be added. And on top of that, little Zhuan's strength is nearing its limit, so one must hurry before she runs out of steam. The demonic Asura stood up, spitting blood. He praised them for their teamwork and said that this strike was pretty good. He said there seems to be a lot more to the main character than he thought. Shuhan tensed up after hearing him say that. The demonic Asura pounced on the protagonist with words to force him to reveal all his secrets. Shuhan realizes that the matter smells fried. so we need to come up with some kind of plan as soon as possible. The demonic leader, meanwhile, had moved behind the protagonist's back and was about to attack him. That one was about to hit Shuhan's face with his right funeral punch. The protagonist got into a defensive stance to deflect his blow, but he decides to act sneaky and tricks the protagonist by punching him under the breath. Shuhan was seriously injured again. He flies off with little Juan to the side. Both landed very hard from that punch. The demonic Asura approached the cat and said that she had a demonic bloodline, and if he keeps her in captivity, she will constantly fuel him with demonic power so that he can break through the purple cloud realm and enter the dragon elephant realm through the metaphysical space from Buddhism. The demonic ringleader said that today was really productive and was going to approach Hong Jan to finish her off. She can't use her powers at all because she's been immobilized from a powerful hold on her shoulder. The demonic Asura said it was a pity to kill such a beautiful young lady, but a mission is a mission, so one must kill no matter what. He was about to kill her when all of a sudden, the protagonist screams at him not to kill her. He unleashes all his demonic energy. It bursts out and starts crashing through the trees in the forest. Shuhan's eyes glowed like a demon's, and his blade exuded the strongest demonic aura. The demonic Asura replied that the one was no further than the diamond realm, so how could he stand on his feet after his full strike? The protagonist didn't listen to him until the end and attacked the enemy head-on. Shuhan lands a mighty blow with his blade. The demonic Asura tries to repel his blow with his hands, but all to no avail. He thought to himself that it wouldn't be so easy to get rid of him. The protagonist shouted for the blade to let him chop up his opponent. His blade began to cut through his opponent's metal armor and began to slash him. The demonic Asura's arms were severed. The one was panicked as his limbs began to fly away from their master. A scream of furious pain began to echo throughout the forest. The demonic Asura, screaming in pain, silenced the protagonist that he would not let him live. He ordered Yang to kill Shuhan. A mysterious spirit started circling from behind the trees. The protagonist didn't realize what was happening. From behind the trees, a mysterious Yanggu stepped out. He was just as strong as Shuhan. He had demonic eyes and a strength that was not inferior to the protagonist. Shuhan saw that that kid also had the same demonic aura as him. Yanggu began to swiftly approach the protagonist with the most menacing look possible, showing that he was ready to kill instantly for his ringleader who had suffered at the hands of Shuhan. He began to accumulate his demonic power. No way, it was Lu Qing, Shuhan's old buddy. His old buddy abruptly pounced on the protagonist with the intent to kill him. He was about to deliver a fatal blow thanks to his demonic aura. Shuhan barely managed to dodge his attack. It was very close. He almost threw a punch, but in just a millisecond, the protagonist managed to dodge it. But he still managed to hurt him a little. His face was scratched to the point of blood. The one continued to swiftly attack the protagonist as he came to his senses. He tries for a front kick again, but Xu Hanyu manages to fend it off thanks to his blade. The protagonist asks the mercenary who wants to kill him, is he really the same Lucien, or is he mistaken? The one only growled at him in response. If it's really Lucien, then he didn't die in the Forest of Compulsion? But how and why did he become like this? His body is covered in demonic energy and also demonized. Now he's driven only by animal instincts. What on earth has that damn palace of hell done to his old pal? Lucien attacks the protagonist, exuding demonic energy that should kill him in no time. Shuhan releases his blade from his hands. It looks like he's up to something. The protagonist became a pillar and waited for his old buddy to get close to him. Hongjian shouted for Shuhan to be careful. The demonic Asura laughed hysterically and ordered Lu Cheng to kill the protagonist. Shuhan grabs his old buddy by the arm. They fought each other hand to hand. The protagonist tried to bring his old friend to his senses as best he could. He shouted to Liu Sheng that he was Shuhan, his old best friend. Lucien wounded the hands of the protagonist, but he didn't care. He still continued to bring his friend to his senses. He started to remember him. Lucien remembers his best friend's name. The protagonist continued to talk to him and began to bring him to his senses through old stories. How they once perfected and hardened themselves together in the dark room of a gambling house. How they once went on a trial in the woods together. But then a terrible thing happened. Shuhan tearfully asked him why he had done such a thing. With tears in his eyes, he replied to his friend that he was glad that he was able to survive after all. The protagonist continued to restrain Lushan. Toth remembers his old buddy after all and comes to his senses. He releases him from his dead grip. Lucian didn't know what to say to his friend, so he remained silent. He walks away from Shuhan, who asks him where he went. The demonic Asura shouted to the non-existent Yang to come back and kill the protagonist. Lucan turns to face his pseudo-head. He approaches him, the demonic Asura praised him and told him to come back. And then, but that's not the case. Lucien punches through the demonic Asura. Hongjan was shocked at this turn of events. The main character also didn't expect this from his best friend. The demonic Asura falls dead to the ground. Lucan replied to his best friend to keep on living no matter what. After that, he turns around and goes the other way. The protagonist tries to stop him by calling out to him. He shouted after him, asking where he had gone and asked him to wait for him. But Zhuhan didn't manage to catch him. He started to feel something. Zhuhan began to transform into a demon. Demonic patterns began to appear on his face, and his hand exuded a more sinister aura. He was shocked to find such a powerful aura bubbling in his body. Meanwhile, Lucien hid behind the forest thicket and walked away in a direction unknown to anyone. The exhausted protagonist tries to call out to his comrade, but all to no avail, he continues to hide behind the forest vegetation. The protagonist was on his knees, clutching his sewn demonic with his other hand. There was a demonic energy hovering in the air near him. Hongjan tried to bring Zhuhan to his senses, but he was already trying to resist as hard as he could so as not to accidentally hurt her. He called out to her not to get close to him because he might accidentally hurt her without even realizing it. Hongjan was shocked. What was going on with Zhuhan right now? What kind of frenzied power dwelled in his body right now? This demonic power can either be released or it can be absorbed. Asura's punching technique will definitely not help the protagonist in this. So how can he absorb it? What do you need to do? Zhuhan's demonic hand began to bleed. Streams of blood began to seep out of his hand. He was in a hell of a lot of pain. If he continued to exude demonic energy, his body would rupture and he would die. At this point, there is only one way to absorb this demonic energy. Zhuhan remembered about the Great Sword Seed of Evolution. If you think of it this way, the Great Sword Seed of Evolution is a kind of vessel that the practitioner fills with sword intent, inner energy, and true essence. The seed of the sword takes root and sprouts until it blossoms into a lotus flower, which is used to create the Great Tao. The inner strength, true essence, and intention of the sword are forms of power. And although demonic energy is somewhat different from them, it is essentially the same power. The protagonist began to activate the sword seed. He sat down in a meditative pose and began to work magic on the seed, imprinting his demonic energy into it. It's now or never. Zhuhan began to imprint his demonic energy into this seed. The strongest demonic aura rose up around him, raising a huge pillar of dust near the protagonist. The sword seed rose into the air and began to absorb all the sinister energy. Demonic energy began to curl around him, forming a sphere. Demonic sprouts have formed on it. Zhuhan began to spurt blood from overexertion. He was already at his limit from such a strong flow of energy that was leaving his body and traveling to his seed. Hongjan was very scared when she saw this. She didn't understand what was happening to him. The main character near him formed a powerful demonic field that was the size of an entire field. Hongjan stood and watched this terrifying sight. The demonic power had finally fully entered the sword seed. It began to sprout at a furious rate. The seed took root and a sprout sprouted out of it. Finally, the seed of the great sword of evolution that was created by demonic power has taken root and sprouted. Kunlun is a fabulous mountain range stretching from Longevity Hill and all the way to the palace of the Queen Mother of the West. Near the huge statue of an ancient turtle sat a great many monks, of whom only a skeleton and a robe remained. Among the mountain of corpses sat the head of the estate in the meditating posture of a monk. Suddenly he smelled something wrong. Huge black clouds loomed near the statue. A thunderstorm tornado began to form in the air. The strongest wind currents surrounded the statue's enormous height. A huge divine silhouette appeared in the sky. The spirit said that 17 years ago, an evil creature had ruined his heavenly plan and corrupted his calculations. And now, 17 years later, the soul of that monster was still alive, and the seed of evil had taken root. A huge spiritual eye from the clouds looked at the monks who were sitting in a meditating posture. The spirit struck with powerful thunderous attacks to the ground. The sky had cleared. The birds flew somewhere far away from the mountain surface. The protagonist sat resting from sheer exhaustion. He's finally done it. The seed of the great evolution sword had taken root. Hongjan replied that it was amazing that all of his wounds had recovered. Zhuhan saw a violent tornado above his head that was circling at a frantic speed. Huge bolts of lightning erupted from it, striking the ground with furious force. One of the huge lightning bolts struck the protagonist, It didn't hit Hongjian. She barely had time to dodge it. Zhuhan screamed infernally in extreme pain. Hongjian was shocked at this turn of events. She thought that he was about to die in front of her. That lightning strike had just destroyed the sword seed. The main character was very seriously injured from the lightning attack. He didn't understand why this was happening now. He looked up at the sky to see who had decided to mess with him like that. A huge tornado thunder spirit was looking at him from the heavens. The protagonist asked the spirit what he had done wrong. Why did the spirit do that to him? He just wants to live, not hurt someone, so why is he so vengeful? For what reason? Suddenly, the seed came to life again. It started to sprout and take root again. Hongjian, holding baby Zhuan in her arms, was shocked. Was this really a heavenly test for Zhuhan? All three targets of the heavenly trial are powerful. Zhuhan is no further than the diamond realm. So how did he bring the heavenly trial upon himself then? The protagonist has picked up his legendary blade. He asked the celestial spirit, raising his sword into the air. Had he committed any serious offense? Or why did he then strike it in the seat of the sword? He replied that in order to survive, he had created a sinful seed that took the chai of all beings and thus destroyed the reincarnation of heaven. That was the first sin. Then he took the murderous sword in the demon's hand and worshipped the traitor. This is the second sin. And then he turned to heaven with a sword in his hand, thus not honoring God. This is the third sin. Now the three sins will be penalized, and he will be punished for his willful life, and the spirit of the protagonist will be destroyed immediately. The lightning struck the main character again. He stood looking up at the sky as it flew straight at him. The main character was in shock at everything that was happening to him in those minutes. He remembered his words when he was still young, that he had promised to sell his body to bury his stepfather with dignity. He also remembered the words of his best friend Liu Shen when he told him to keep living well for his sake. The protagonist remembered the old man's words when he told him that he could still develop the art of sword wielding. The lightning was coming towards Zhuhan and was a millimeter away from him. The silhouette of a little boy named Zhuhan appeared in the main character's eyes as he stood there with hopelessness, wondering what to do next. It was then that Zhuhan realized that it was too early for him to die. He replied to the spiritual being in the heavens that he was not obeying the orders of the deity and was not ready to die so easily. He was ready to prove to all his comrades that he could live a worthy life. The lightning struck the protagonist. He stood and looked at it and realized that he would not give up so easily. This attack was heard in the distant mountains where the head of the estate sat near the dead monks. Someone came to him. A mysterious man with a sword stood at his back and looked at him. The old man replied that the one had indeed come to him. It was Fu, the brother of Kanghai Liu Mochenzi. The one said that the disciple went to Mount Daiwan alone, suppressed the demon king, and left a seed in this world. How could he now idly watch this action? Fu rose with incredible speed into the air, hitting the ground. The old man only sat and watched this, continuing to meditate further near the monks. The man flew up into the air towards the heavenly thunder spirit to fight him. The spirit asked the man how the descendant of the sword dared to stand in his way. Fu replied that the Kunlun immortal realm had turned to dust, and only the southern wilderness remained to guard this world, according to the ancient covenant, and the revered celestial had repeatedly interfered in the affairs of the mortal world. Has he forgotten the names of the wise men of past ages? The celestial spirit replied that people die, and there is nothing to be done about it. The sky is his sky, the earth is his earth. The celestial spirit replied that he wanted to destroy the protagonist and dare not even get in his way. Fu pointed his finger at the celestial. He had conjured a spiritual sword that should slay the heavenly spirit. The celestial was displeased, a tiny insect daring to fight back against him in his heavenly wrath. This is the height of insolence. Mo Chen Zi replied that he had been guarding the sword tomb for 60 years under the order of his ancestors. His heavenly blade struck the ground with all his speed. Mo Chen Zi conjured a hail of heavenly blades that pierced the earth. He said he worked tirelessly and didn't relax for a minute while following orders. The old man was shocked. Is this really the heavenly realm? Now the heavens have no virtue and want to send calamity on the sword heir, and he, Mo Chen Zi, is helpless. So he uses his remaining body to protect his progeny from this calamity. He asked his ancestors to help him in his fight against heaven. The spirit replied that the soul had gone to the heels, to suppress the power of heaven. The great Tao of nature. One can also develop the art of sword wielding. A hail of blades rose into the air to slay the celestial spirit so that it wouldn't even dare to injure the descendant anymore. Mo Chen Zi attacked the celestial with a hail of swords. Suddenly the sky began to clear after his attack. The storm clouds began to move away. Meanwhile, the badly wounded protagonist was on his knees and looking up at the sky. He didn't understand why everything had stopped so abruptly. Little Juan, together with Hong Jan, ran to the badly injured Shuhan. He fell exhausted to the ground, where a huge crater had formed from a huge lightning strike. She touched the protagonist's back with her hand. She sensed that his internal organs were badly damaged, but a mysterious power was helping him repair them. Hong Jan told Little Juan to go together and look for a quiet place to cure the protagonist. The cat meowed in agreement. The mysterious drunkard shouted at the top of his voice that you should sing at the top of your voice when you're drunk, not drunk. You can't rest. A drunken man started dancing around the bushes holding his flask of alcohol. Little Shuhan walked through the field looking back. A mysterious man in a solid robe appeared in front of him. He asked the boy if he had thought hard, for today was the 7th day. With tears in his eyes, the protagonist replied that he didn't want to kill people. He asked why was it a mandatory task. He replied that if he did not kill them, he would die as a result. The mysterious man in the robe took the boy by the shoulder and told him that this world is inherently cannibalistic and he would have to sacrifice, because if he didn't, he would be killed sooner or later. Had he forgotten why he had sold himself to the infernal palace? Had he forgotten what he had promised to Lu Cheng? The protagonist remembered the promise he made to his best friend. He remembered Lu Sheng's last words as he stood with his back to him, ready to accept his death to save his best friend. The one stood with a bloody hand and told him to survive at all costs for him. He saw the adult Lu Chen in front of him. He stood in front of him, looking sternly at the little boy. But suddenly that one disappeared, vaporizing, becoming demonic energy. There was almost nothing left of his best friend, his spirit disappearing before his eyes. Shuhan tried to call out to Lu Shan, but he continued to disappear without even turning around to his best friend. The protagonist is awake. It was only a bad dream. Hongjun was glad that Shuhan had finally woken up. She wiped the sweaty boy with a towel. Thoth was upset. He realized it was a dream after all. He didn't realize where they were now. How did they end up here? Hongjun replied that lightning suddenly dissipated that day for some reason. He was very badly injured, and she wanted to find a remote place to heal him. But she happened to meet Brother Chu, who has medical skills, so he brought her here. The main character asked, "Who is Chu's brother?" She said that the one was a hunter from this town and he looked after him when he was out. Linlin Pavilion isn't far from here, and if it's fine, they can head there anytime. The protagonist was confused. With such turmoil in the forest, people had to be hiding. How could she accidentally meet a hunter? Besides, with Ye Hongjian's mindset, it was easy for her to trust a stranger and come to his house. Meanwhile, a drunken healer came to them, with a joyful little Zhuan sitting on his shoulder. The main character wasn't thrilled because he doesn't know the man at all. The joyful Zhuan ran to Shuhan, meowing happily. He immediately stopped being angry and started hugging the kitty. The main character was approached by Chu, who was carrying soup in his hands. He replied to Shuhan that it was chicken broth. The chicken was raised by a neighbor, and he had to work hard to get it. Let him drink the broth while it's hot, because it's good for his health. The protagonist still continued to look at him suspiciously, while still, at the same time, continuing to squeeze the pussycat. Shuhan asked the man if they had met somewhere before. The man replied that he must be joking because he had lived here since childhood and had never been to Chang'an. So how could he know him? The protagonist remembered his wallet. Hadn't he stolen his wallet that day in Chang'an? The soup in his hands trembled when he heard that. Chu replied that he must have met his twin brother, and he was the one who stole his wallet. He replied that his name was Chu Chu Li, and his brother's name was Chu Chu Ju, and he had once gone to Chang'an and idled all day long, and it seems that he had run into his brother. He apologized to the protagonist. The latter looked at him with a suspicious look. The protagonist told him not to tell him fairy tales. Chu asked Hongjian for help, but she only looked at him with shock. But still, she decided to play along with the man and said, "Chu Chu Li's brother is very good, and how could he steal Shuhan's wallet?" Shuhan only looked at them like a fool and a fool. Hongjian remembered something. She said that Brother Chu lived here alone, and as a thank you for saving him, she would like to take him with her to the Linlong Pavilion and see if they could find him a job. She asked Shuhan what he would say to that. He grinned in agreement. He thought to himself that he would watch their play with pleasure. Chu replied with a very satisfied grimace that in that case, he was very grateful to Mistress. He told the main character that he still had half a chicken cooking in the pot, and he would look at it to see if it was cooked or not yet. He wanted to tell him to watch the chicken being cooked, but from the other side, someone kicked in the doors and kicked the doors with all his might in the face. Chu. A fat woman with a broom in her hands was standing there yelling at Chu. She shouted that she had finally caught the chicken thief. He stood there looking at her, tears streaming down his eyes. He told her it was some kind of misunderstanding and wanted her to listen to him, but there were screams in their house that could be heard all around. The owner of the dead hen was beating the thief with a broom to the fullest. It's September, the 17th year of the Yuan dynasty. This is the majestic Mount Ya. Its height is 2,700 meters. At the top of the mountain was the Moon Palace. The supreme elder of Linlong Pavilion, Sai Kunbai, visited the lunar palace. The gray-haired sage Sai Kunbai sat in front of another old man. This old man is the ultimate epiphany. Coins sprinkled from the sage's cup. He began to count them. A supreme seer who sat in a moon palace for 600 years, asking for good luck in his life. Suddenly, the old man was wounded by something unknown. The elder saw the surprised, mangled face of the old man and asked what was the matter. The latter replied that no harm had been done to him by this power. The seer handed the caution sheet to Ji Kunbai. On the sheet was a ferocious mountain sword for killing a ruler, except that king killing had its own natural laws. Possessing the Xingqian sword is the greatest crime. The main character had this sword. Meanwhile, they were being chased by a granny who had stolen a chicken and used it to make a delicious healing soup. The beaten Chu was barely waddling behind them. The woman shouted in rage to the heroes not to run away from her and to exact her vengeance on them. Chu shouted throughout the forest that they needed to get away from her as soon as possible. They ran as fast as they could. Hongjian asked the protagonist if he was okay. He replied that he was fine, but he was just very tired. Poor Chu, who was tired, also asked if he was all right. He also said that this auntie had a lot of energy. She had chased them for 2 kilometers, and they should recover as soon as possible so that she wouldn't catch up with them and beat them up. Hongjian resented the thief. He glared at her angrily. He had stolen a chicken for Shuhan to make a healing broth, and she was not happy. What a woman. He begged her to praise him. She said that she had misspoken and did not mean to offend him. Hongjian tried to cheer up the protagonist by saying that Brother Chu also wanted to strengthen his body. Zhuhan tried to forget all of this, reminding himself that it was just a game. After recovering, he replied that he understood that Brother Chu did not wish him any harm, but was only trying to help him. Zhuhan said that it would be better if they went to Linlong Pavilion early to avoid making things worse. Next, the events take place at the Linlong Pavilion on Zhongju Peak. The exhausted and wounded pavilion fighters sat still before the master of the hall. The master of the Linlong Pavilion Sword Hall, Ding Jingsheng, shouted at them and asked, how could they fail in such an important matter? He was furious. The master asked Hongjian where to go, but they just sat still and didn't know what to say to him. Tong reported to Uncle Mentor that those thieves appeared suddenly. After the attack and the chaotic battle, although the thieves retreated, but Sister Preceptor and that Shuhan had already disappeared without a trace. The Sword Hall Master aggressively asked him, could he call her that so cavalierly? Tong said that when they came to their senses, that Sis Mentor Ye had already disappeared, and they had no choice but to go back and report it to their elder. Ning Zhuman, the master of the Linlong Pavilion, walked into the hall. He asked them what was going on after all. Luo Yin stood up and greeted the master. The master replied for everyone to stand up. He sat down and said that he thought that as long as Yuan Guiling was looking after the Long Night Department, Zhu Xian wouldn't have a chance to strike. But since the Linlong Pavilion was busy, he left it up to his juniors. Master added that it was his oversight, and after they went downstairs, have them go to Xuanhe Peak and take the pills that would help them recover. Tong, on behalf of the entire company, thanked the master for his leniency toward them. The hall master asked when those thieves slew them, were they able to see them? Tong pulled out the swords that had been recovered during the duel with the thieves. Ding Jingcheng was shocked. Could these weapons really be from the Da Xia country? Did that mean the attackers were from there? The pavilion master replied that this is the interior of the central plain. And besides, if they wanted to kill Ye Hongjian, they wouldn't have left her alive. So the attackers didn't fight off Ti Xin and the others, casually leaving their swords for them to discover. Ding Jingcheng asked in surprise, then why did he think they did this? A boy ran into the hall and called out to Uncle Mentor. The one yelled at him that it was extremely inconsiderate and too ugly, but still asked what was wrong. The pavilion master asked the youngster what he wanted to tell everyone. He said that there were 3 people standing at the gate, and one of them called herself Ye Hongjian. The pavilion master replied that let those come inside. The heroes arrived at Linlong Palace, which was located on Zhongju Mountain. They arrived at the small Shangyao Palace. The boy with the green bow told Hongjian to stay in this place for the time being, and if she had any instructions, she should tell him. She thanked the boy. It was bright outside. The sun was breaking through Mount Ya. The protagonist heard someone knocking on his door while he was rubbing his legendary blade. Chu went in and told him to try his egg noodles and offered him steamed fish and duck in light vinegar. Little Zhuan was delighted by these dishes on the table. She begged with all her appearance for Zhuhan to let her dine with him. He gave the little glutton some soup. Chu said that the lady has already eaten, and now this portion is theirs. Now let the main character eat too. He asked why Zhuhan is looking at him like that and called him Zhuaner. The protagonist asked, "Who is that person? Is he really the lover of the mistress from whom he stole the chicken?" Chu shockingly denied it. Yuan Gailong treats her as his own daughter, and if he hears him say that, he will not be able to take his head off. Zhuhan was surprised. Was it really the one from Tianhe Palace? Chu grumbled angrily and asked, "Didn't he look like he was from the Tian's palace?" The protagonist said he looks like him and don't let him get mad at him. He also added that the one was sent to protect Ye Hongjian. But where was the one when he was fighting the demonic Asura? Chu replied that it was all the fault of Istod Ulao Sanyan's scent. He abruptly got up from the table and said that he had to meet someone and had to go. Zhuhan didn't realize what had just happened. The protagonist didn't understand. How could the Tianhe Palace send such a bum to protect Hongjian? Some kind of commotion was going on outside. Zhuhan wondered what was going on. Tong and the guys were trying to calm the angry crowd. The protagonist stood there wondering what was going on. The disgruntled man pointed his finger at Zhuhan and said that his servant was hanging around his house today, and he noticed that he was missing one chicken after him. The protagonist was no longer particularly surprised by this. Another guy said he had a duck missing from his yard after that thief. The third sobbed hysterically that he had lost a fish from the pond. The weeping friend replied that Zhuhan must have sent Chu to fetch all this good stuff and make dinner out of it. From the look of the protagonist, it was obvious that he wanted to kill him and push all these dishes into one place and deep. Linglong Pavilion's brother calmed everyone down by saying that the Jinjian court would definitely investigate the matter. In the meantime, Zhuhan quickly ran away without being seen by the Pavilion brothers. Hongjian came out to the people. Everyone was dumbfounded by her fierce beauty. Linlun Pavilion's brother has a crush on her. Zhuhan walked up to her and whispered that those say that he had encouraged Brother Chu to steal things. She was surprised at such a statement. Hongjian replied to the people that there must have been some mistake and that the spouse couldn't have done such a thing. But since the honorable people insisted on it, then she shouldn't argue, she'd better. We'll hand over the sack of silver liang and let those share it amongst themselves. Let it be as an apology from Hongjian. She said it was her first time in Linlong Palace and asked them to take care of her in the future. The Pavilion brother was shocked. Could it be that Zhuhan is her husband? The other brother told her not to worry and that they would take care of the matter. Hongjian thanked them for this favor. Night reigned in the courtyard. Zhuhan heard his evening meditation being interrupted by someone. Brother Chu had already dragged some kind of bag on his shoulders. He dumped a pile of goodies on the floor. There were books, a mirror, a necklace, and a bunch of rags. The main character wanted to put this bag over his head and beat him up. Zhuhan saw all this mountain of all sorts of goodness. He was shocked by what he saw. Chu said that those assholes dared to block the Lord's way. He went to their houses and rummaged around a bit, let Zhuhan see if there was anything useful, and if there was nothing useful, he would go there again. Zhuhan was desperate. Chu was surprised. Doesn't anything fit? Let him just tell me what he needs. He's a 63rd generation robber, and there's no one he can't rob. The protagonist was furious. What the hell is stealing? Zhuhan thought so and decided so, since that one is really that dexterous. Chu embarrassingly stated that he was selling his talent, but certainly not his body. Zhuhan asked the man, looking at him with a weary gaze. What was he talking about? He only wanted to ask if he could steal some things for him. Chu waved his hands in surprise and said, "That's what this is about. Since he says he needs to steal some things, well, if the master wishes so, then let his wish be fulfilled." The protagonist began listing what he needed to steal. First, he needed to steal loyan grass. Then he needs to steal Bei Manhwa flowers. And for dessert, Ningxiangho berries. Chu looked at Zhuhan with fear. Did his master really want him to die so badly? The thief cried and said that these were all very precious medicinal ingredients, and they were mostly grown in the Jishifu Palace at the top of the waterfall. And they're also under the protection of Master Li Chungjing. So how can he get them? It was no surprise to the protagonist that the rare herbs that can heal a demon's arm, not every person he meets can get hold of. Zhuhan mockingly asked the man, didn't he say that no one could stop him from stealing anything? Chu replied that thieves also have honor, and the point is to steal all this discreetly. But this Li Chung Jing, even a mosquito will not fly past. It is no longer stealing and robbery. You can't break the rules, so he can't steal at all. Zhuhan was holding a book describing the nature of Lin Long. He started flipping through it, teasing the thief and saying that he just didn't have the knack. Chu replied that of course not. He was just strictly observing all the rules of thief etiquette. Zhuhan noticed something in the book. He deducted something in it that was very similar to the events that had happened to him during his battle with the spiritual heavenly deity. So why would a celestial of such a level and with such capabilities target him? Was it all because he had injected demonic power into Dian's sword seed? The protagonist told the thief that there were many vaults of books at the top of Mount Dahuanfeng and let him help him find records of either the heavenly trial or people who had ascended to the realm of the celestials. He replied that it was no problem at all and he would help him with the case. How much information does he need? The protagonist replied that the more he collected, the better. Chu agreed to this deal. Zhuhan collapsed onto his bed without a backward glance. He lay there thinking that he didn't even know how Ashung was doing. Meanwhile, further events are unfolding in Senlo's palace. The bull in the red robe called the mercenaries lowlifes because they caused the demonic Asurus in purple robes to be killed. He asked in a rage, "Who did it?" The mercenary speculated that it could have been done by a master who was secretly guarding the Linlun palace. The horse asked as some unknown master wanted to contact Chanyesa. Bull realized that this meant that. He beheaded all the mercenaries who stood near him. Only Li Shen survived. It was the horse that picked that purple one. What are they going to do now? The one replied that in any case, the half-demon Yanggu he had cultivated was fine, so it was no big deal. But he didn't realize that it was Liu Shen who had killed that demonic Asura. The horse gave some kind of treat from his hand to the half-demon Yang Hu and told him to eat it. The one took and obediently ate this unknown fruit. Yang Gu swallowed that bit. The horse ordered him to tread away, and he obeyed and went away. The demonic Liu Shen was heading somewhere. He was looking somewhere with his demonic blank stare. He walked over to a metal door that had bars on the window. Lucan walked into the room and spat out that strange fruit that makes him a demon. The one didn't swallow at the mayor's command after all. He was holding a strange fruit that demonized him more and more each time. Lucian tried to remember, who is Zhuhan and who is he really? He realized that he was not the half-demon Yanggu. He was a different person. He began to get a bad headache from not continuing to take a course of these strange berries. He lay screaming in agony from the intense pain. Lucan was furious. This drug helps him curb his demonic power. However, he pays the price each time with his mind. He needs to remember his past as soon as possible. Lucian began to meditate, combating his demonic energy. Meanwhile, Zhuhan put the book back on the table after reading it. He sighed heavily because he spent a lot of time reading. He finally finished reading a whole mountain of books. The main character was holding the pills that Brother Chu stole. They are the most common cultivation tool. It can be dangerous for people like him that have used destructive practices and thus damaged their spiritual channels, however. As they say, he who doesn't take risks doesn't drink champagne. The main character drank a bunch of pills in one go. Afterward, he sat down on his bed and began to meditate. He felt real chi flowing in his blood. The protagonist felt quite a bit of discomfort after taking the pills. He has only one way out. He needs to gather all the energy and move it to Dantian. Zhuhan began to meditate harder. He gathered all his energy in one place. After a long meditation, he felt that he had sort of succeeded. Of course, for someone who had passed the heavenly trials, just a little bit of pure chi energy was enough, and the power of heaven and earth would nourish the body of such a person. Thanks to these pills, Zhuhan's spiritual channels were completely restored. 6 pills restored a dozen spiritual channels. It would take about 60,000 to fully restore one's body. He also needs precious medicinal herbs to restore his demonic arm. The protagonist is already quite tired after all these procedures, and his demonic arm is sick. Meanwhile, the drunkard Shu came to Zhuhan's house. He held a flask of wine in his hands and praised the wine, saying how great it was, how wonderful it was. He asked the protagonist why he was frowning. After all, as they say, enjoy every day of your life, don't they? He asked him. Zhuhan asked the drunkard if there was any other way to get the Linlong Pavilion pills. The one replied that it was very difficult to steal them. He asked the protagonist if he still needed them. Zhuhan replied with a desperate voice that he was asking about how they could possibly be obtained legally, not how they could be stolen. Chu excitedly said that one was so courteous and just to let him have it all to himself. The drunken thief said he was going to pay them a visit. The main character screamed and asked him what he was up to. He ordered him to come back to him immediately. It was September. and the events were taking place at Zhongju Peak. The brothers discussed among themselves that one of them had managed to get the pills, but they had disappeared again. This is the work of evil spirits, no other way. The other brother replied that his pills had also disappeared, and he had spent half a day looking for them, but had not found them. The Linlun Pavilion disciple knocked at the gate. He stood with a confused look and waited to be admitted to his audience. No one opened to him, then he knocked again. At the palace, they asked, "Who has come to see them?" The main character looked outside. He asked what that kid wanted with him. The boy was confused and didn't know what to say in response. The main character was surprised. Was he really from Jinjin? Did someone see Chu steal the pills? Was he sent here for inspection? The kid handed Zhuhan a wallet. He said that the pretty girl gave it to them, but they can't accept it. The protagonist sighed heavily that he wasn't here to be beaten up for stealing pills. He said that Hongjian was not at home right now, and he would give this wallet to her as soon as she returned. He thanked the boy and wanted to go back to the palace, but he called him back and said that he was here not only for that, but also to talk to Brother Shu. The protagonist wondered, what did the kid want with him? He called him inside and asked him what he wanted from him. The kid introduced himself. His name is Sung Yue Ming. He strongly hoped that he would be able to break his engagement to Hongjian. Zhuhan choked on his tea at this unexpected statement. Zhuhan was surprised. Could it be that men really couldn't resist her? He asked him why he said that. After all, their union is a personal order from the Lord, her father, so everything is fair game. Sun replied in a panic that it is indeed so. He knows about this order. But marriages aren't just because it's fair. People have to be right for each other. They have to love each other mutually. The protagonist asked him, what was he getting at after all? Sun replied that people usually focus on background and financial status in this matter, but he thinks that a husband and wife should have similar thoughts, outlook on the world, and even goals. They should support each other. He asked Zhuhan not to think that he was looking down on him. It was just that he had been deeply unhappy as a child, unable to cultivate. He also added that Miss E was a real talent sent from heaven to earth, and if they were together, they would not only not be able to help her in any way, but would only be a burden to her. He should let her go for her own good. Zhuhan asked, was that the reason why he still hadn't confessed his feelings to her? Kid Sun almost cried at such words. The protagonist said that time passes, people's lives are not eternal, and Brother Sun is ashamed that he can't follow the call of his heart. Asking him to do the same, Zhuhan said, the one demanding the impossible from him. Sun stood there and couldn't even find the words to respond to his comments. He abruptly stood up from the table, causing even Zhuhan to jump up from such a sudden prank. Toth thanked the protagonist for the lesson and asked permission to adjourn to his business, and thanked him for giving him a moment of his time. Meanwhile, it was morning outside. Zhuhan was meditating throughout, using various incense. He inhaled those scents and tried to feel the full power of his energy. Thanks to the medicine that Hongjian brought, it was possible to restore and clear a few more spiritual channels, however. Even if it wasn't enough, we should tell Chu to bring it all back. Suddenly, the main character was summoned by Sun, asking him to open the gate as soon as possible. He said that what the man said to him yesterday, it's really true, and he still doesn't understand why Brother Shu can't let her go. He asked him to reveal his reason. Zhuhan made a hand expression on his face. He said angrily that he could let her go. Hongjian had admired him since childhood, and she couldn't resist the offer to be his wife, and apparently Brother Sun actively relies on rumors, and moreover believes in them, and that's not what noble people do. Sun replied that the one was so stupid in everything the protagonist had said now, he had internalized perfectly. He apologized profusely. The protagonist wanted to say something to him, but Sun had already quickly walked away from him. Zhuhan didn't understand what had just happened. On the third day, again early in the morning, he came again and started ramming all over the wretched gate. Sun stood panting, and Zhuhan already didn't know how to get rid of that annoying kid. The boy said that based on yesterday's conversation, it could be inferred that she had deep feelings for Zhuhan. As the ancient saying, return courtesy for courtesy, She should repay her kindness by letting her sail free. You could tell by the protagonist's expression that he was ready to let that fucking philosopher float free. Zhuhan thought in his head that this simpleton's stupidity was simply astounding. On the fourth day, he came again. Realistically, this door needs to retire. It has seen too much these days. On the fifth day, it came to him again. It was now 10 days later. Chu noticed that Zhuhan was going somewhere early. He was surprised at this, and Zhuhan's tired look also signaled that he was also surprised at this. If the protagonist doesn't leave now, that annoying kid will come to him again. Zhuhan walked down the snowy path. He remembered how he used to drag his stepfather's corpse as a child. Yeah, it was a horrible memory. The protagonist replied that snow brings back bad memories. A mysterious voice from behind answered Juhan that he watched him sigh heavily every day. Why is it like that? A long-haired man with a long robe sat in front of him, holding some sort of book. The protagonist replied that if you don't look ahead, you won't get in trouble, because who among them doesn't have sad memories? The man agreed to this. He showed Juhan where to sit down, and he thanked him for it. Juhan saw a book that he was very much interested in. He asked the man if he had read anything useful, for he sees him every day with these books. And the man replied that the instruction of the sages, the administration of the state, how could it be useless? The protagonist replied that it was quite ambitious. Does it sound like Brother Tai wants to become a civil servant? The one replied that he was interested in the subject, but it was not his goal. Knowledge is never superfluous. No one knows when it might still come in handy. Juhan thanked him sincerely for such words and said that he admired his view of the world. The one was surprised to hear his name. Is it really from Mr. Ya? Tai apologized for his disrespect and replied that he was confused. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call him Brother Mentor. Juhan said that there was no need for that, because they were equal, and moreover it was still unknown on whom the favor of the eldest daughter of the Ye family would descend. The latter replied that an honest man did not need to justify himself and that he did not need to worry. Thoth smirked and said that it was indeed true. Tai said that since they happened to meet today, why wouldn't Juhan visit him? The protagonist was surprised at such a spontaneous suggestion. As a result, he gladly accepted his parlor offer. Juhan entered the room together with Tai. The protagonist was very much surprised that the one had a huge library. Juhan noticed something. He picked up a book that interested him a great deal. The protagonist has noticed the records of the rebellion against King Mu, which has gotten publicized. People try to avoid even the slightest mention of it. Does one dare to read even such dangerous literature? Tai said, forbidden books, unworthy of mentioning people. So what is the difference between knowledge and ignorance? The main character said that at that time the entire Mu family was wiped out. Only the little heir managed to survive. So you could say that Tai and the prince should be the same age. The one replied that it wasn't just the little prince who survived then. Juhan was very much surprised. Are there still survivors? Who are they? Tak said that King Mutai's half-brother was once the king of northern Xinjiang, Muji. It was rumored that even from childhood he was a very sickly child, and naturally the old king handed over his powers to the eldest child, Mutai. Muji was extremely displeased and began to cooperate with the Order of Eternal Night. Juhan was shocked by what he heard. In the pursuit of fame and fortune, even blood relatives can betray. Tai asked, what did Brother Shu think about Muji? He replied that he was a terrible person. But Tai said that he finally managed to reconcile with the Mu family's 200,000 strong army, which was one step away from starting a rebellion, as well as securing the great Zhou dynasty for nearly a decade. Juhan was shocked at what he heard. Tai added that Mutai was no equal in martial arts, but his entire family was slaughtered and Muji couldn't cultivate. But he ruled the northern territory since a dozen years, and sometimes if everyone says, you're invincible, you can't stand up to the system. Reading such books would definitely never be unnecessary. Juhan replied that he had learned an incredible amount from their conversation today and thanked him for it. Tai, on the other hand, replied that he was honored to have met him. And he also added that pill theft had made quite a bit of noise recently, so Juhan needed to be more cautious. Since he is also an apprentice, the clan gives him 3 vials of concentrated elixir every month, which is 100 times more effective than ordinary pills. Tai said he saved one of the vials for the main character, and he could have it. Juhan was touched. The protagonist was returning to his palace, but saw that there was an angry mob standing there again. They were shouting that who would even dare to steal things directly from the house. Juhan was afraid that Chu had flashed somewhere after all, and everyone had found out the truth about him. The boy stood there and told the thief that ever since he came to Zhongju Peak, their pills had been disappearing at an alarming rate. Last time, if it hadn't been for Miss, he wouldn't have gotten off so easy. Juhan roused the crowd and asked them to step back and let him pass. Meng Shugo, who was standing opposite Juhan, used to accompany Hong Zhan. He told the protagonist that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He was ordered to investigate the pill theft and asked Juhan to cooperate in the matter. The protagonist was stunned with panic. Suppose even if he hadn't taken the pills, he still couldn't say for sure if they could find the vial of them. Meng shouted at Chu to give him directions so he could investigate. But the main character intervened in their conversation and stopped him. Meng looked at the protagonist with a sly smile and asked, did he really have anything to worry about? Juhan looked at this asshole with a menacing gaze. Hongjan came out of the palace. She asked, "What's even going on here?" Meng greeted her and said that they had received orders to investigate the pill theft. He wished to come in and inspect the premises, but Mr. Shu was resisting it. Juhan and Shu prayed with their gaze that she wouldn't give them away. Hongjan replied that in that case she should deal with it and allowed Meng to search the palace. The protagonist and the thief stood in a stupor. They did not know what awaited them next. The sleuth thanked her for her cooperation. He ordered his partners to go inside and search each of the rooms. Shu's crying, "It's over now, it's over. This will put an end to his future brilliant career. It's just a failure, his reputation is over." Shuhan reminded him. Hadn't he forgotten why they were kicked out of Xingsheng? Meng asked his partners, had they found any leads? Everyone replied that they had found nothing, that everywhere was empty. Shu and Shuhan stood there, unable to understand where the medicine vials had abruptly disappeared to. How can this be? Meng shouted that how was that possible? That it was obvious that the main character had taken pills at least a couple times. One of his partners said they searched everything they could except Hongjan's room. Meng was shocked. Had she really helped them cover up their crime? Still, he apologized for his recklessness and that it seemed that Mr. Shu really had nothing to do with stealing the pills. He bowed and said that they were leaving. Hongjan stopped him with a menacing look and told him to wait. He asked her, did the miss have any more business with them? Hongjan slapped Meng's cheek with all her might. Everyone was shocked by this, and he flew off, splattering blood in different directions. Juhan and Shu stood in shock at this. That's a fighting woman. They were afraid that they'd get it too. Hongjan struck with such power that he broke through the doors to the palace and flew out into the street. Meng sealed himself into a tree from such a powerful slap. Hongjan shouted that Juhan was her husband, and if they still had any doubts about him, they could check it out. If they find anything, she will be punished along with him. If they don't, it is proof that they have slandered her husband, and this slap is a warning and a lesson to him. If it happens again, the price for slander will be his life. Night reigned outside. Juhan lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about something. He remembered Hongjan's words that he was her husband, and if anyone had any doubts about him, let them check. But they would be punished for slander by having their heads cut off. The protagonist became embarrassed at the memory. Someone knocked on his room. It was Hongjan. Juhan didn't expect her to come to him at such a late hour. He invited her to have tea with him and also thanked her for what she had done for him and Shu today. He said that he was, after all, a disciple of a respected mentor and should be less concerned with petty things like stealing, and if he really needed the pills so badly, she would send someone to give them to him. The protagonist thanked her for such an offer. Hongjan said that Master had returned to the clan today, and there would be a ceremony to select mentors tomorrow, and asked if he wanted to go there. Juhan asked if Sekun Bai had returned, but he replied that he wouldn't go there, and that Master had once said that one shouldn't reveal one's identity regardless of how the relationship between the Heavenly Strategy Mansion and Linlin Pavilion turned out. Hongjan took note of this. She also added that today the Jinjian clan had been handing out pills, and Meng Shu Go had already reached the third cultivation boundary, and it looked like he had used at least 5 pieces. Hongjan winked at the protagonist. She said she was going to her place. Morning came, the rays of the sun breaking through the high mountain. The protagonist has been practicing his ability to wield demonic energy through meditation. Juhan pondered, these concentrated pills are really impressive, and just one is worth 100 ordinary pills. The main character was called out by someone. It was Sung Yue Ming. Today is the ceremony, and all the disciples should definitely be there. So why didn't he go there and instead he's taking out the palace doors? Juhan looked outside. Song said that they had discussed the topic a few days ago, and he now had quite a bit of food for thought. The protagonist couldn't stand it and said he would make that one leave now, and in a week or two, he would give him his answer. Sun said he saw what happened yesterday, and that slap. She loves him very much, and he can't undermine her trust in any way. Juhan was shocked by such a response. The protagonist wondered, how did the man come to that conclusion? All right, though, as long as he wouldn't touch him, then so be it. He agreed to his conclusion with a smirk on his face. The mysterious maiden came to the palace gate and asked, does Juhan live here? Both boys were shocked by her appearance. It was Chin Keking! The main character was embarrassed and very much surprised by her appearance. Sun panikedly replied that they'd just been talking about him and Miss E, so it was inappropriate to look at other women. The protagonist couldn't stand it and punched that philosopher, telling him to stop talking nonsense. Keqing stood and said that Hong Jian had sent her to give him the pills. Zhuhan thanked her sincerely for her favor. She, however, replied that it was only her duty. Keqing turned around after saying those words and left. She wondered, the voice seemed a little familiar to her. She hadn't seen his face. At that moment, she had only seen him in his mask and bandages. The protagonist stood red as a tomato from embarrassment. Night had fallen again in the courtyard. Zhuhan walked down the street and looked for little Zhuan. The main character heard someone's laughter. He turned around in surprise. A little girl was holding a kitty cat in her hands and saying that one was a good girl. Little Zhuan, meanwhile, lay in her arms and purred happily in response. Zhuhan was furious, scaring Zhuan like that. And this girl is no ordinary person at all. The protagonist approached the girl and asked her, "Who is she?" She said with a smile on her face that this kitty was a good one and asked him to give her to her. Zhuhan angrily replied that she had taken his cat without asking. Didn't she think it was at least disrespectful to him? The girl was surprised and said he was too nervous. She cast the protagonist far aside. Zhuhan had used his demonic power against her. She didn't expect it to go this far. The girl smiled and added that the man was really mad at her. She swung her arm at the speed of light. The protagonist tries to break through her defenses with his demonic arm. A serious battle broke out between them in the gazebo. The main character was shocked. Could it be that she used only her index finger in battle? The girl stopped Zhuhan's fist with her index finger. Zhuhan did not expect that the little girl would turn out to be so strong. He flew back from her telepathic strike, breaking through the wooden frame of the gazebo. Zhuhan recovered from the blow from the mythical girl. Her punch even left a huge mark in the tree pillar. Zhuhan realized that she was quite strong, but he didn't understand. Who was she after all? Does she have the strength level of a secluded realm or even higher? The girl asked, "How could you be so stingy? She just wanted to look at the kitty. She didn't say she was serious about taking her away." The protagonist then replied that she would return little Zhuan to him. There was a sudden question from the girl. Does he know how to make baked potatoes? She asked him to help him cook, and in return she would give him the cat. The little girl had already tried to cook potatoes, but the result was only coals. She said it was all the fault of a guy named Chen. She had waited so long for him, but he never showed up. He used to make potatoes for her all the time. Zhuhan set fire to the wooden drawstring with his breath. He threw it into the firebox with the rest of the wood to make it burn even hotter. Zhuhan was surprised that there were quite a few weirdos in the Linlong pavilion. The girl asked him what he was waiting for. The main character answered that yams should be cooked in a special way. The first firewood should be burned through, then new firewood should be thrown in, and the potatoes themselves should be put on the warmed up ones so they will be very fragrant, but nothing will burn together with them. The girl was indignant and said that Chen cooked differently. Meanwhile, the yams were already cooking over the fire. The little girl's mouth watered at the aroma and sight of the potatoes. Little Zhuan's appetite was also whetted. She was pleased and said the yams were very tasty, to which the protagonist wished her a pleasant appetite. The girl praised Zhuhan and said that compared to the potatoes that were cooked by Chen, although his was just as delicious, the protagonist asked, "What is it about Chen that she keeps talking about?" She replied that it was some fool. Zhuhan asked with a smirk on his face, "Does she really like him?" The girl said that he told her that when she was sad, she could bake a yam, and as soon as she ate it, the yam would appear. She finished the last bite. They sat around the fire and continued to stare at him in silence. The girl asked, "Why does a person make a promise time after time but never keep it?" Zhuhan cheered her up and said that he might just be very busy and not coming to see her because of that. Or he didn't like her enough. The girl screamed and said that she had probably brought too few potatoes. She ran and said she'd bring more. Further in the same time frame, events were taking place at the peak of a mountain waterfall. Ning Juman replied to the mentor that the Taoist conference is a big event, but the one replied that people all over the world say that the chaos of the Great Week is the result of retributions for the present emperor's patricide. But if it is his punishment, why should ordinary people suffer for it? Sekunbai added that the calamity had already happened, and the old man should kill him to find out what would happen next. Ning Juman replied that this was unacceptable, although the emperor is quite a fiery person, but he has wide support and protects them from chaos. So why should he be harmed? The mentor said that of course he does, he knows, but things don't always work out the way they want them to. Great power has been hiding in Taiyin Palace for over 600 years, but 60 years ago, something happened. Ning Juman replied that not too long ago he had asked to write a hexagram for him. There was something written on it. If he finds this sword, he will have the opportunity to kill the emperor. The conference is a great opportunity to find the sword. The mentor said that Hong Jian was incredibly talented. Another month and he would train her. That would be the end of it for him. 60 years ago, he was defeated. This time, Sai Kunbai will try for him. The old man replied to Zhuman that if he did not do so, the burden would fall on his shoulders. Ning Zhuman replied that he would live up to his mentor's expectation. Meanwhile, Zhuhan was being called out by someone outside again. You think it was some bureaucrat or some buddy of the protagonist? It wasn't. It was Sun again, raping the doors at the crack of dawn. Both Zhuhan and little Zhuan had gone out to see him and hadn't even woken up yet. The protagonist has already formally asked him what he wants from him. Sun called him to follow him and told him that everything was ready, to which he replied that these battles were fought every year, and why should one go there at all, if not to light up one's face? He refused to follow him. But Sun said that the winner has the right to represent the monastery at the conference that will be held in a month, and the champions may be noticed and invited to study at prestigious institutions, as well as given pills as a reward. The barely awake Shuhan was greatly surprised when it came to pills. He was still happy with this offer and ran after Soon. The main character asked if it was even possible to get the pills from Linlin Pavilion any other way without entering the competition. The kid replied that of course you can. Zhejiang gives out different errands every month, which are available to everyone in succession. After completing a task, a reward corresponding to its difficulty is given out. Shuhan remembered that it was almost like the Senlo Dian Temple, and he didn't even know if a parallel could be drawn between the two. Song said that yesterday Hong Zhan had ordered so many pills to be delivered to him. Is it still not enough for him? He is just wondering, after all, he only needs to clear his spiritual channels. So why would he need such a huge amount of pills? The protagonist replied that there was a secret way to restore the spiritual channels that had been passed down from generation to generation in his family, but it required a lot of medicinal material, so Sun was surprised at such a response from him. He braked hard. Song said that although he didn't possess such riches as Hong Jian, he only had one concentrated pill and a few ordinary pills, and he gave them all to Shuhan to use. The protagonist was surprised at this sudden generosity. The one replied that his father had always said that you should help people, and besides, he had indeed been a bit annoying for a couple of days. But the one had always been very kind to him, and so this was a thank you to him. Zhuhan accepted the gift of a concentrated vial of medicine. The protagonist thanked him and told him that he would always remember it and would definitely pay him back. Sun denied that their meeting was fated and they are friends after all, so let him never say that. Shuhan was surprised by his words. The protagonist thanked him and said he wouldn't say that again. Further events are taking place in the competition arena. The fighters were in the ring. Sun was very much surprised that things were so heavily animated here. Someone shouted out that a Zhuanhe Peak disciple had been injured. He was lying on the floor, holding onto his bleeding wound. The fighter wounded him so badly that his sword cracked in his hands. Sun was greatly surprised by this. All of a sudden, Keichin shushed everyone. She was at the tournament as a healer. She ran to the injured boy to heal him. She told him to bear it for a while she healed his wounds. She treated the boy's wound with a dry aseptic towel so that it would stop bleeding. Keichin started casting healing magic. The girl brought up her fingers that had magical healing power gathered on them, and she began to run them along the cut to make it heal. The kid was in a lot of pain. He screamed furiously with red eyes. Soon he passed out. Keichin had not expected this outcome. She wondered what had happened after all. After all, his bleeding had been stopped. Then what was the cause? The protagonist approached her and told her to block 5 acupuncture points. He said that the heart is the center of the whole body. Qi energy should also flow through it. Even though she stopped his blood flow by blocking the flow, but that's how Qi energy can't circulate either. Keking began to heal the boy under Zhuhan's guidance. He told her to block the circulatory system, but to also block the 5 main acupuncture points. The protagonist asked Sun to lend him his sword. He threw it to him at his request. Zhuhan took his blade in his hands. The protagonist said that a man's life was at stake, and it was necessary to act without delay. It was necessary to start a fire as soon as possible to heat the iron. But the mysterious foot stepping on Suna's head replied that it would take too long. She was here for that. To his rescue came a gal who loves fried yams very much. Everyone was very surprised. Is it really Miss Ziyu? Zhuhan was shocked when he heard her name. Fang Ziyu is the second sister of the great Dingdin of Zhongju Peak. She asked the stunned protagonist if he still needed the light. She conjured it with magic. Flame creation is within the control of cultivators who have crossed the boundary of the secluded realm. Such an advancement in cultivation at such a young age. Zhuhan was shocked. Ziyu said that she would help him now, and in return, he would have to bake her potatoes next time. He agreed to her proposal. Zhuhan realized that he was almost done. He could soon proceed to heal the wounded kid. He brought a blade heated to an incredible degree to his wound. The man screamed with the pain of hell. He told Keishin to give him something. Meanwhile, the kid was out of it from the shock. The girl gave him a healing pot. Zhuhan told her that when there was nothing threatening his life now, it could be used to restore his body as soon as possible. Everyone was thrilled to see such a spectacle. They said that Dr. Shuhan's technique was amazing. Meanwhile, Ning Juman was watching them. Keichin thanked the protagonist for his help today. The man replied that he hadn't had any trouble with it at all, so there was no need to thank him. Her friends called her to come over. Keking asked Zhuhan to teach her the technique sometime. He said he would be happy to help with it. She thanked him wholeheartedly for his favor. The girl went to her friends, and the protagonist was embarrassed that the savior from his childhood turned to him for help. Song walked up to Xuanhe. He said that he didn't even realize that he was a healer from a god. After all, even the experienced disciples from Xuanhe Peak couldn't compare to him. The kid with a smile on his face asked the protagonist how he guessed that this was the way to stop the blood. The main character answered that if you cauterize the wound with red-hot steel, the blood will clot faster, and it is the fastest way and the most common, and there is nothing so surprising in it. The rest he learned from his teacher. Complete night darkness reigned in the courtyard. Shuhan was surprised that Hongjian hadn't come to the palace yet. However, it was already evening, and knowing Chu Chu Li's predilections, would they be able to return without bringing a bunch of things with them? Shuhan called out to the lover of stealing other people's things. The protagonist was surprised. Why doesn't anyone answer him? Shuhan suspected something wrong. He was about to attack the premises because he suspected an ambush might be waiting for him inside. The room was bright, which meant someone was inside. Shuhan was greatly surprised by this. Was he being played for a joke? He was so angry that he was ready to use his demonic energy. Shuhan was already prepared to attack the possible opponent. Waiting inside his house was Ning Juman, who was standing on his own doorstep. Such purple robes are worn by the great masters of Lin Lun. Who the hell is he? The protagonist doesn't know him personally yet. Juman sensed the demonic energy in the kid. Zhuhan was already prepared to fight him if he suddenly attacked him. Ning Juman only scoffed at him and asked him if he was thinking of killing him with the Asura technique. Would he think twice before using it? The protagonist recognized the pavilion master. Zhuhan asked him what was the matter for which he had come to him. A small needle flew towards the protagonist. He didn't realize what just happened. Ning Juman wound the thread around his fingers and abruptly pulled the needle towards himself. A silver needle that was filled with chi energy was stabbed into the body. Zhuhan couldn't even move after such a stunt. Juman replied that he was going to see what kind of person the kid was. He pulled the thread on himself. He saw something. The main character was sitting in a meditating pose with overflowing energy all around him. Ning Juman had seen many things. The Asura technique of the infernal Asura clan. The seed of the great sword evolution. The remnant of the effects of the medicine from the Tianzi manor. Busy, busy, busy. Shuhan replied to the curious barbarian that over a year ago, Lun Kunyun had sent people to kill Chiang Hai Lu, but they were all killed by the infernal Asura clan. The only one who survived was Keichin. She was saved by one of the assassins. Ning Juman replied that the age of that killer was about the same as his. After that, Liu Qianhai had a new disciple. And even later, just when Qianhai Lu went to the Daiwan Mountains, a teacher from Tiangxi Manor disappeared, and nothing is still known about him. Juman replied that here Zhuhan abruptly appears, and it is unclear who he is, and the latter soon becomes Ye Chengtai's son-in-law. Isn't that a coincidence? The protagonist replied that the time was late, and he had only come to tell him these tall tales. He replied that of course not. He had come to invite the boy to his sect. Zhuhan was shocked at such a sudden suggestion. The one asked if the guy was surprised. He appreciated his vast knowledge of healing and thought, why not invite him to Xuanhe Peak? If he accepted, he would receive 200 concentrated pills every month. But the protagonist is not stupid and immediately asked about the terms of entry. Toth replied that the guy had to keep one promise to him. Toth asked, which one? Ning Juman replied that no matter what happened, he hoped to remember the favor that Linlong Pavilion had done today. When the time comes, then he will support him as the pavilion's successor. Zhuhan was surprised. Right now, the Linlong Pavilion was in its prime, and even if it were to fail one day, why on earth should he support it? Juman said that there are many paths in the world. Some are wide, while others are like an abyss. he could help the Linglong Pavilion find the wide road. He told the protagonist that when he made a decision, he would come to Xuanhe Peak and find him there. After saying that, he vanished. But the thread in Zhuhan's chest continued to stick out. The protagonist was shocked. What should he do with it now? The needle is gone. Now he can move again. He thought that the meridian recovery could wait, but the demonic arm could not, if one were to take this opportunity to get more pills. Zhuhan realized that Ning Zhuman's offer was quite favorable to him. Therefore, he couldn't refuse it. The protagonist came to Zhuman's palace. He walked up to the door of his estate. Waiting for Zhuhan inside was Ning Zhuman himself, who was sitting in a meditating pose. He asked the kid, had he thought his proposal through well? The protagonist, however, replied that he would join Xuanhe Peak but not the sect, and he also asked to change the conditions that he would receive 300 concentrated pills every month. Ning Zhuman agreed to his terms and said that he would be his official at the Linlong Pavilion. The protagonist also said he needed loyan grass, bei manghua flowers, and ning xiangguo berries. The old man replied that they were rare medicinal plants, and even if he agreed to give them to him, many elders would be against it. But he could have them if. Zhuhan angrily asked, if anything, let him tell it to the end. Zhuman said that it was simple. Let him just give the answer to his one question. Song Hailu went to the Daiwan Mountains and has not been heard from since. So what happened to the old man? The protagonist replied that he was dead. Zhuman was surprised by this. Then the sword that Zhuhan currently had behind his back. So this is the old man's legendary blade? Zhuhan replied that it was a second question. Ning Zhuman said that the plants he was asking for were very rare, and since he had agreed to give them to him and would even help him make the pills, could he ask him for something? The protagonist asked, what about? The one replied that he should not let other people know what kind of sword he now held in his hands. Zhuhan wondered, what was he up to? Back then, a bunch of people were trying to kill Chiang Hailuye. Not because of the sword, right? With his strength, it's not that hard to take the sword away, so why doesn't he do anything about it? The protagonist agreed to his request. It was bright outside and the birds were flying to warm places. Keqing waited for Zhuhan outside. The protagonist wondered, why is Miss Qin here? She replied that she had already thanked him, but still, if not for his help, then the fighter would have died on the spot. Zhuhan replied that there was no need to thank him, for human life was precious and he had done what he had to do. But she had actually come to ask him about whether he had visited Jingxing City in Chongzhou Province 2 years ago. The protagonist was in a panic. Had she really begun to suspect something? Zhuhan said that he had lived in Liangzhou Province since childhood and had never been to Chongzhou and asked, why did she ask him such a question? Keqing asked if he was sure of what he said. The protagonist calmly replied that he was sure. She told him that a man had saved her life and she didn't know what the man looked like and couldn't thank her savior. Except, it's not like she never told him her name was Qin Keqing. The protagonist didn't know what to say to her. Keqing thanked him from the bottom of his heart for saving him on that ill-fated day. She turned around and walked off in the other direction. Zhuhan was embarrassed after her words. There was an echo from the palace that some brat had joined Xuanhe Peak. The kid from Linlong Pavilion replied that he didn't even know how that one managed and asked his brother, what should they do now? Tong was furious after all. He wanted to become a personal disciple, then he would be closer to Hongjian. What an ambush. He was angry at the protagonist. Tong asked his brother to go and find out who that guy was with at the pavilion. Further events take place on Chunjufeng Peak at the Jianding Pavilion. The mysterious man hurried to the manor for an audience. The meditating old man was called out and told him that this Ningmang was really something. Hongjian's lousy fiancé was accepted by him as a guest, so he also gives him 300 concentrated pills a month. They entered the school from a young age, sacrificing their lives for Linlong Pavilion, and now how much do they get per month? He said he would let him think about it. The director of the Linlong Pavilion had his own reasons, and Elder Sikong had not yet spoken on the matter, so they shouldn't interfere. Tom should be more patient, but the man wanted to object. The old man replied that he had heard that Yanlai City in Qingzhou was infested with demons, and the clan disciples had asked them for help many times. Were they going to do something in response? The man said that the demons have been trapped in the mountains for many years, and they have long been no danger to the clan. He thinks it's just some of the small undead causing trouble again, and he has already organized Li Qing's personal disciples, Yue Ning. The old man said that even though the demon race had Qinglian Guangdomen in their ranks, they should not be underestimated and let them go to Xuanhe Peak and ask for 2 more healers, as well as find a disciple from Dahuang Peak just in case. The man replied not to worry and that he would organize everything. The old man reflected that it seemed to be time to change the rule that only Xuan Heo Peak would get the position of Linlong Pavilion Master. That one wondered what Ning Zhuman was up to after all. It was snowing heavily outside. Keichen was busily grinding something in a mortar. Zhuhan trained her and told her to just let her be attentive and everything would work out for her. She thanked him for really helping her a lot today. The protagonist said that he hadn't done anything special. Zhuhan thought about the fact that after that, Keichen no longer asked about the events of 2 years ago, but only came to the doctor for advice from time to time. Could it be that she was trying to deceive him? Or was she? A voice was heard in the room telling Brother Sun to wait outside because there was a lot of smoke in the kitchen, to which he replied that it was fine and that he would help with the cleanup. Sun told Chu that partying was bad for the mind and alcoholism was bad for the heart. Though why would he drink when with his skills, he could make good money in the restaurant business? Did Chu know that relying on history, you can realize yourself with help? A talkative boy was silenced with a bun. He didn't expect to be shut up so unceremoniously. Chu ran outside and said that since Brother Sun himself wanted to help, let him bring out the food and he would bring out the wine. The guy started setting the table. Song said it was a pity that Big Brother Joe wasn't here today. Last time he heard him say that the Xia dynasty was amassing troops overseas, and he wondered if there was any news about it. The protagonist said that the army was led by Kui Ting, a pillar of the Xia dynasty, a man of high culture, well-versed in military and legal arts, who almost never lost a battle. Chu hurriedly ran inside. Zhuhan asked, "Didn't the man go to get a drink, and what happened that the panting man came running to them?" Chu replied that Tong Tishan was currently dismantling his brother Zhou's house with a group of people. The main character was shocked at what he heard. Who is this person? Does some inner disciple dare to molest him? Sun replied that Zhuhan didn't know about it. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. He mused that although Brother Zhou is actually a personal disciple, it's not about cultivation, but about his family connections, and Brother Tong won first place in the big competition and became Uncle Qing Ruxi's personal disciple in Chunjifeng. The protagonist realized that he had to hurry. He apologized to Keichen for suddenly having to bow out, to which she replied that there was no problem with that. It was snowing very hard outside. The heroes ran to the palace where the racket was taking place. The pavilion brother commanded his boys to clean up the things he was pointing his finger at as well. Meanwhile, Tong stood contentedly watching what was happening. Sun was greatly surprised at what was happening. Tai sat sadly going through the books that the people from the pavilion had thrown out into the street. Zhuhan approached Zhou. The latter was glad that he had come to see him. He said that Zhuhan was just in time. On the wet ground, the ink in the books could easily be soaked with moisture. Tong and his guys called out to the protagonist and asked what brought him here from Xuanhe Peak. Song whispered in the protagonist's ear and said that they were Qing Rushi, Yuling Chu, and Bai Fengyi's past disciples, and that it was best not to mess around with them. But the protagonist was not a timid person and mockingly asked them, "Isn't this Brother Zhou's court? I never thought Brother Tong would engage in such heresy." Tong's anger is boiling over, but some brilliant idea came to his mind. He told Zhuhan that he was good at scratching his tongue, but according to the rules of Linlong Pavilion, the residence of disciples was determined by their strength, and this place seemed quite interesting, and he decided to challenge Brother Zhou to a duel, but the latter did not respond. Sun told him not to talk nonsense. This was the outside of the student's residence, and they were having a fight here. Tong replied that he was just following the rules, and there was no need for him to throw around accusations. He shouted to his guys not to stand in a pole and to keep taking things out of Tai's house. One of his brothers willingly heeded his command. Zhuhan replied menacingly for those to put their things back and stop rampaging. Tong replied that if he wasn't happy with the rules of the pavilion, then how about the protagonist fighting him on behalf of Brother Zhou? Zhuhan said that was what he wanted to do. Tong got into a fighting stance and said that since he was the guest secretary of the sect head, according to the rules of Linlong Pavilion, he would hold back. The protagonist said that he didn't know the rules of Linlong Pavilion, he only knew the rules of Zhang Hu and asked Chu to tell him. The one said that the world ended and the enmity ended with the sword, and everyone carries their own life and death. Tong interrupted them and said that since they were so proud of their own death, he would grant it to them and said to let the main character attack. Zhuhan attacked him without using the full power of his demonic arm. The protagonist concentrated his energy into one point, and Tong, seeing this, became quite tense. He was shocked. What kind of aura was that? Tong's comrades shouted to him to be careful. He got himself into a protective stance so he wouldn't kill him. The protagonist delivers a mighty blow with his demonic arm, tossing the arrogant Tong aside. He flew pretty far away. Tong was bleeding and unconscious. All of the brothers of the Linlun Pavilion were very scared. Even Sun was shocked by this. Chu, on the other hand, stood there and looked at such a sight with a satisfied look. Meanwhile, Tai sat and gathered his books under a tree so that they wouldn't get wet and the writing wouldn't go to waste. The protagonist said that Tong seems to still be breathing, so he needs to be finished off. But he was stopped and told that one had already won, and they apologized. They will have their people move things back into the house. But Shuhan replied that they had enough on their plate and didn't need them to carry anything, and said he would just finish off the Tong and be done with it. The girls shouted after him that this was Linlong Pavilion, and how dare he say such a thing? Shuhan replied that she was right after all. After all, this was Linlong's court, and killing would not solve anything. Everyone finally exhaled in peace. But Shuhan said just this. Tong was attacked by little Zhuan. He was lying there screaming in agony. She did something to him. Little Zhuan chewed off 2 of Tong's fingers. She spit them out onto the ground as if she chewed something nasty off. 2 bloody fingers fell to the ground. All the guys were in wild shock at what they saw. Shuhan said that the latter agreed to fight him in a fight, not for life, but for death, and so it happened. The protagonist respects Linlong Pavilion as a big sect of righteous people, so he will accept his 2 fingers in exchange for his life. He threatened the others that from now on, when he saw him, he would have to bow his head like a dog, and if he disobeyed the order, he would take away the life he himself had given him. The Pavilion brother told the others to take senior brother Tong to the healer at Xuanhe Peak. They hurriedly took him to the doctor. Suddenly, some sharp breathing appeared in the air. Shuhan was surprised by this. Tong's brother replied that he would pay for ripping off his brother's fingers in front of him. The protagonist realized that the one was even stronger than the previous Shura envoy of the Shikoku Kingdom. Song stood between Shuhan. He told Yao that the duel between Mr. Shu and brother Tong had been agreed upon by both sides, and he were witnesses. Would it be a fair decision to attack them? Yao angrily replied that who gave him the right to talk to him like that? He pushed Sun away and told him to get out of the way. Shuhan's got Suna. The one asked Yao in surprise what on earth had happened to him. He angrily replied that the one seemed worth teaching manners. But Zhuhan interrupted him and gathered all his demonic strength into a fist. The protagonist resists a punch from Yao, who attacks him. Zhuhan felt that the one had a very powerful palm. Suddenly, Zhuhan was supported from behind by someone. It was Tai. He came to the protagonist and Shun's rescue. Zhuhan was in shock. Could it be that he had just been able to stop the force of that strike? Tai went up to an angry Yao and asked him that in the 8 years he had been here, had he ever done anything wrong? He replied that he had never once done anything wrong. Yao said that he had no right to interfere in the conflict between him and disciple Tong, but that lousy Shuhan had offended him in front of him and he couldn't let it go. But Zhou didn't see it that way after all. Brother Shu had stood up for him and he can't just leave it at that either. Yao laughed loudly in response. He said that the latter had given him enough respect by calling him a disciple, but did the latter really think he was worthy of being a personal disciple of Linlun Pavilion? If the latter wants respect, then let him show what he can do. Zhou accepted his challenge. He activated his full power. Zhuhan and Sun were shocked by what they saw. Sun was surprised. This majestic aura did not arise from the use of real strength or internal energy. Zhuhan thought that it was more like something innate, more pure and noble. Yao replied that since he wanted to stand up for the kid, he would teach him a lesson. He tried to stop Zhou's attack. Meanwhile, the main character stood with a surprised face and watched this picture. Zhuhan realized that Zhou didn't have the slightest desire to dodge, and this strange aura from his body was becoming more and more majestic. Meanwhile, at the same time, inside Zhou Zheng's house, the blades on the wall began to sparkle. The protagonist did not understand. Why did he have such strength? It makes you shiver. A hot yam unexpectedly flew into Yao's hand. Zhuhan called out to Zhou to dodge the sudden attack. Zhou was shocked at what was happening. He didn't realize that this was even happening now. Yao has been hit by a yam. What a throw! How much force was the potato thrown with so that it could wound him to the point of bleeding? He shouted back, "What kind of trickster hides in the shadows and strikes unexpectedly? This tactic is disgraceful." A mysterious voice called out to Yao and asked, "Was all this his work?" It was Fang Ziyu. She said he was too hot-tempered. She asked him how he could scold his older sister. Maybe he was the one who should have been taught the rules of Linlun Pavilion. Yao didn't expect to see Fang Ziyu in front of him. He apologized and said he never thought she would decide to play a prank on him. Fang Ziyu replied to him to kindly return all the things back to their place, and he himself could leave to go about his business. Yao added for her to take pity on him, for teacher Qingru's honor depended on it. But the woman asked him in return that her lord's honor meant nothing to him at all. Yao was shocked at what he had just heard. He shouted, asking what Uncle Jun had to do with this, and was it really the same with Jun in this situation too? It turned out that Zhou Zhang was Master Zhang's disciple. He took note of what she said and said he would clean up the place immediately. Yao grabbed his henchwoman, and together they went to clean the room. Fang Ziyu snorted unhappily at the heroes. She told Zhuhan that he should now bake her a sweet potato for this deed. The protagonist replied with surprise that he was at her service. Zhou thanked the heroes for today's deed. He added that brother's son was not in the best condition and that he should be taken to Xuanhe Peak for treatment, and when he was done with his business, he would join them. The protagonist replied that he would take him there right away. The heroes went to Xuanhe Peak together, while Fang Ziyu and Zhou stayed behind to clean up. She asked Zhou if he remembered his teacher's words. He replied that of course he remembered them, because living only one life, one can experience many things. But there are some things that cannot be experienced. Meanwhile, further events take place at Xuanhe Peak in a public facility. A blue-robed official asked, "What is the reason for calling all the elders and deacons?" Another official asked, "Is it perhaps because of what happened yesterday?" The man in the green robe replied that if the quarrel between the students had not resulted in casualties, why call the elders? After all, they had enough to worry about. They were discussing amongst themselves. What was the reason for such a large gathering of people then? This Ningzhuman always behaves unpredictably, and they think he's just too comfortable in his role as sect leader. In front of them, Master Tong Tiexin, a Buddhist monk, sat in the center, Qingru Shi. Meanwhile, Master Ningzhuman had arrived at the elders' meeting. He walked in on everyone else with a stern look on his face. Everyone began to greet him, and he in turn replied that everyone was welcome to sit down. The disgruntled elder stood up and wanted to voice his displeasure right to his face. He replied that Zhuhan, the guest secretary of Xuanhe Peak, had stripped his disciple Tong Tiexin of his fingers, so he was asking to be judged for this act. Ningzhuman replied, "Let him not worry about it, for he already knew about this incident, and he would send people to look after him. So let him be sure that he would recover in 5 days." The elder kneeled before him. He shouted that the Zhuhan had indiscriminately chopped off 2 of his disciples' fingers. If such a villain was not punished severely, he was afraid that it might cause everyone in the sect to doubt him. Juman told Qing that the matter was still unclear and let them wait for Tong to recover and then summon all those involved and meet with him in person before deciding who was right and who was wrong. That's not why he brought them here. Qing replied in tears that Linlong Pavilion Master was the leader of righteousness in this world, and if they continued to harbor evildoers from justice, it could eventually shake or even destroy their 1,000-year legacy. Ningzhuman angrily said that it was important to distinguish between matters in terms of importance and urgency. But the latter hysterically declared that isn't preserving their school's heritage more important than this case. The other elder asked Zhuman to simply answer Elder Qing's question in order to finish this matter quickly. The others agreed with him. After all, the elder had worked hard for Linlin Pavilion for many years and deserved answers. Ningzhuman angrily agreed with them. He got angry and scattered a pile of sheets of parchment that had a lot of important information on it. He was furious and said that since they were talking about the clan's heritage, let them decide what was more important: Elder Qing's son, who was causing trouble, or what was written in this letter. The elders read what it said and they were shocked. They continued to read what it said with fear. They read something horrifying. Ningzhuman answered them that in just 2 months, the Linlong Pavilion had lost 3 elders, 4 deacons, and 9 personal disciples. So let them now tell him what is important: the position of a disciple or the Linlong Pavilion. It was a month later. It was December outside the middle of winter. People walked past the main character's palace with a dissatisfied face. Zhuhan realized that a thunderstorm was approaching. He's locked himself away in his palace out of harm's way. Ningzhuman was sitting in his courtyard with a teapot in his hands. The protagonist asked him, shouldn't he be dealing with the internal affairs of the pavilion right now? The one answered him and told him that he had come for the sake of giving him something. Zhuman handed him a vial of pills. The main character was greatly surprised. Could it really be the pill of desolation? Ningzhuman replied that it was exactly her. The protagonist accepted such a generous gift from him. This pill is made from 3 main herbs, namely Luyan herb, northern mango flower, and condensed fragrant fruit, and supplemented with hundreds of precious herbs. It is quite an intricate process and is definitely the most precious pill. It will come in handy for Xuanhe to refine his demon arm. He replied that it was an unexpected gift. Zhuman said that there was a large formation in the Xuanlong cauldron at the top of Xuanhe Peak. These herbs allow you to speed up the pill-making process by several levels. The protagonist thanked him from the bottom of his heart for such a generous and expensive gift. But the latter answered him to take his time in thanking him. Zhuhan was surprised by this. Ning Zhuman replied that in return for this pill, he would have to fulfill his request. The protagonist asked which one. Yanlai City in Qingzhou is haunted by demons. Linlong Pavilion sent some disciples there, but almost all of them strangely died. And after 3 days, Chunji Summit will send his disciple Fang Ziyu there again to investigate the matter. Zhuman wants Zhuhan to go there with her. Zhuhan replied that he had certainly heard about the demon invasion, but the disciples he had sent there were no match for him anyway. So what was the point of him going there with someone, especially someone who might get hurt? Ning Zhuman said that there was someone who had secretly targeted Linlong Pavilion recently, and although Ziyu's cultivation is unusually high for him, Zhuhan has a good relationship with her, so she might listen to him. Since they are both from Senluo Temple, they already know how they work. Zhuhan was surprised. Senluo Temple? Does he really think he had anything to do with it? Ning Zhuman replied that he was only guessing. Qingzhou is just within the domain of the temple where the strange demon invasion occurred. And what's more, the pill he gave to the protagonist is a treasure that suppresses demons, so as long as he takes it, it will control the demon to a certain extent. With its protection, Jiyu will be able to live a little longer. Zhuhan didn't know what to reply to the man. He asked him that he wanted him to help him protect Fang Ziyu with his pill. Did he get it right? For the most part, yes, Zhuman replied. Zhuhan remarked that there was something about him not noticing such interest in the other disciples. Was Fang Yu the result of his affair when he was younger? Ning Zhuman looked at the one with a romantic look. The protagonist realized that he seemed to have blurted out a little too much. Ning Zhuman said that he owes her mother a lot, but there's not much he can do for her, so he asked Zhuhan to save her life. The heroes are going to Yanlai in 3 days, so they need to prepare properly. Zhuhan popped a stack of pills into himself. The power of the pill must be channeled through the meridians, so he will restore them first. He then needs to draw power into the meridians. Zhuhan began to concentrate his power in one place. He took a deep breath and began to concentrate on his power. Everything was ready. All meridians were successfully restored. Now it was very important for him to simply channel his inner energy into Dian's seed. The protagonist channeled his energy into the center of the seed. From such tremendous power, it began to sprout with tremendous speed. Zhuhan was shocked by what he saw. All of a sudden, he began to vomit blood from having too much power that he had put into that seed. Later that evening, the protagonist withdrew from overexertion. His demonic power began to retreat dramatically. He didn't understand what had he done wrong. His surrounding spiritual energy was beginning to gather in his dantian. The demonic aura, incompatible with the spiritual aura, mixed into one. If this continues, his body will be torn apart. The protagonist picked up the devastating pill that Ning Zhuman gave him. He took it to regain his strength. After that, Zhuhan once again began to concentrate his demonic energy in one place through meditation. It was very difficult for him to do it because he hadn't rested properly since last time. He's trying to gather his energy into meridians. Suddenly, the seed that the protagonist had been working on for so long began to glow brightly. Finally, Zhuhan has achieved the result he expected. There are 3 classes of pills. Yellow pills are the lowest class, red pills are the middle class, and purple pills are the highest class. Then what is the golden pill inside the main character? After 3 days, the heroes packed up and went on the mission Ning Zhuman had given them. Zhuhan replied that he didn't think Sun and Keiking would go with him. The girl agreed, and Song said that they wanted to tell him about it, but he had been busy for the past few days. The protagonist replied that it was quite a dangerous journey, so he was busy making preparations. Yao replied not to worry, they would make sure that nothing would happen to their guest. Fang Ziyu said that the demons in Yanlai City should not be underestimated. She thinks that they all know about Li Qing and Yuanning's strength, but their deaths are still unexplainable. They must be on guard. The girl from Linlin Pavilion replied that sister was right. There was clearly something unclean here and let everyone be prepared for it. Song asked Fang Ziyu to elaborate on this. She replied that previous reports had said that there was no trace of the demon race. They intended to return to the gate, but were delayed. Eventually, their bodies were found horribly mutilated. To prevent panic among the people of the city, the case was kept secret. Now the bodies of their brothers are still in the governor's mansion, and everyone is waiting for them to come and take them away. Yao said Yanlai is a big city for hundreds of miles. So why isn't there a single messenger here? If he has the body, why has he still not heard anything? If this governor is in conflict with the central government, that might be a good thing. But when they mess with a demon, they might be playing into the hands of the other side. Shuhan replied that in that case, the best solution would be to split up. He ordered Yao and his sister to contact the Taishu side on behalf of Linlun Pavilion. They take the bodies away, making a show of investigating and leaving without success to let the enemy's guard down. And he, along with Fang Ziyu, would sneak in undercover and be able to inspect everything so that the initiative would be in their hands. Sun replied that this is a great plan. Fang Ziyu agreed and said that they would do so. 3 days later, the heroes came to the city of Yanlai in Qingzhou. Standing near the gate was the governor of Shandong province, Xu Chenggang. They were waiting for Yao and his companion to appear. The governor asked them if those from Linglong had been sent. Yao replied that they were disciples of Linglong Pavilion and had come to investigate. Could he find out who that one was? The governor of Yanlai City introduced himself and welcomed them. He asked, they must be very tired from the long journey, so he offered to go with him. He had prepared lunch for them. Meanwhile, the heroes were walking through the center of town amidst the crowds. Shuhan arrived at an important building and said that they needed to go to the 5th floor. The building manager told them to follow him. The mysterious people in the back asked if there was another room for them too. In front of them stood an elderly old man and a young guy who was beautifully dressed. The room manager apologized, but the last few rooms have already been occupied by a young man. However, they have a few other small rooms that are not much inferior. The old man resented him and called him a scoundrel. He said he didn't like the idea of the upper room in the first place, but they dared to offer him even worse conditions? The old man asked the superintendent, is he fed up with living? He was in a panic and didn't know what to do next. Sun defended the room manager and replied to the old man that they were the first to occupy the rooms, and it wasn't Uncle's fault. The old man angrily asked Suna who the man was and how dare he talk to him like that. He's his. The old man's young companion said that since there were no more rooms left, they would just find another room. The old geezer looked at the heroes from under his forehead. He obeyed the kid and didn't say another word. The kid apologized for his ward's insolence. He would be sure to teach him a lesson when they got back, but for now they needed to respond. Sun said there was no problem with that and that it was fine. But the protagonist stopped them. He replied that they had 5 rooms booked and one of them could be allocated to them as well. The young lad didn't expect such generosity from Zhuhang. They thanked the protagonist for such a generous favor. The boy told old man Ying to go and pay for the room and let him take the main one for himself. The old man was not happy with this decision, but he could not refuse him. He handed the protagonist a payment for the room. Zhuhan thought that this pouch contained quite a lot of taki money. The young man said it was his payment for their kindness. The protagonist responded by thanking them for being so generous. The superintendent of the room cheerfully pointed out to the heroes where they needed to go. He was shocked at how much he got for his hospitality. Zhuhan said that his store was so lively and there must be many interesting incidents happening here. Could he tell them about them? The room manager asked if this was the first time he was in Yanlai City. There hasn't been much interesting news here lately, but there are a lot of strange things. Sun happily replied that they could use that as information as well. The superintendent gathered his thoughts and was ready to tell everything to the heroes. On the outskirts of Yanlai City runs the large Yantai River, which freezes every year due to heavy snowfalls. But this year, for some reason, it did not freeze. The fishermen were so happy about this that they went fishing and disappeared one by one. The only one who could come back was crazy and mumbling something about demons. In short, it's a tough time. The heroes went on to explore further. Kekken asked the protagonist, where do they go next? The protagonist replied that they should go for a walk. Chu said snidely that it would be good to go for a walk because he was bored to death in the Linlun Pavilion. The protagonist prodded him and said who would want to go out with him. Keichin laughed in response. She added that they still need to find evidence. They went into a room where it was quite noisy. Someone was shouting, bet big, lose big. Keichin wondered, what are they doing here? The main characters said they would soon see everything with their own eyes. The scammer called them to his place and told them to bet big and lose big, provoking them to bet big. Zhuhan asked her, which side is the best to bet on? She replied that she didn't even know. The protagonist cheered her up and told her not to worry and just pick one of each. She hesitated in her choice. Keking pointed to the blue side for Zhuhan to bet on her. The protagonist accepted her offer and bet on the blue side. He told the scammer he was picking the blue side to bet on. That one was shocked by what he saw. He didn't expect Zhuhan to bet so much on the blue side. The scammer said that unfortunately, he couldn't accept such a huge bid. That's when the main character told him to find someone who could take her in. The one gladly replied for them to follow him. He would lead them to his mistress. The scammer called the heroes inside. There was an enchanting beauty waiting for them inside. Did he really come here to see this woman? Kaichin blushed at the sight of her. The young maiden replied that she was just a fragile girl who ran a gambling establishment and that he would not give her any trouble. But if the young hero desires something else, then the lady is a must. Little Zhuan was delighted at what the scammer along with her master were doing. Kaichin was jealous. Did they? The protagonist replied to the damsel that since when did the master of the Moro Temple engage in such a business? Kaichin was shocked at what she had just heard. The scammer snickered at being figured out. She laughed back at the protagonist. Since the one knows it's Moro Temple territory, she expects him to pay a decent price. Zhuhan replied that of course, and he threw a bag of money on her desk. And inside that pouch was the black dragon's gold. 1 ounce of it is worth more than 5,000 ounces of silver. This is the second person to pay them. She's afraid Yanlai will never be the same again. The maiden asked Zhuhan what he wanted. There's nothing in the whole city she can't handle. The protagonist said he wanted news about the demons that were rampaging through the city. She said she was fine with that amount. The maiden picked up a huge white brush. The main character was shocked when he saw her. Turns out she was holding a judge's feather. Meanwhile, on the estate at night, a young lad in a red robe sat opposite the window drinking hot tea. There was something going on outside. Some mercenary snuck into his room. He bowed to the kid and waited for his further instructions. The one asked him, "How are things going? Had they received any important information?" It was an old man. He said that Zhu Xian has a conflict with Linglong Pavilion, but he still remains in the shadows. His intentions are too unpredictable, but it all boils down to mastering the eastern side of Yanlai City. The lad replied that in 17 years he had mastered 7 streams of dragon breath, and if he succeeded in adding another to them, he feared that the old man clamored for his majesty not to worry about it. He would risk his life to protect the foundation of their great Zhou. The kid ordered his servant up. He said that a serpent can turn into a water dragon, but an ant will never become a real dragon. Man can reach the level of an earth god, but he will not be able to gain complete freedom, and the world always believes that power is given by fate. But not everyone knows that the empire was formed by his own hands. His fate would always lie in his hands. Zhu Xian won't be able to become a real dragon, but even if he does, it will just be a foolish dream to destroy the Zhou kingdom. The young emperor said that the world is always full of fools, and it was only a pity that the teacher had gone to the Daiwan Mountains, because now he had no one else to confide in. The old man asked him, "Does that mean this dragon will be his?" The kid replied that that's exactly what would happen. And not only would this dragon be his, but all the dragons in the world would belong to him alone. And even though Zhu Xian had accomplished many things, it all played into the hands of others in the end. The young emperor placed the cup of tea on the table and rose. He went to the window and wanted to see something out there. Through the window, he saw the heroes going to their rooms. The kid said that after 17 years of calamities, he will finally kill all the dragons in this world. And when that happens, all the dragon energy will be gathered in him, and he will be a pleasure to watch. How he will earn the recognition of the whole world. Meanwhile, the heroes were going up the stairs to their rooms. The protagonist was walking down the corridor with a serious look. Kaichin was alarmed by this. She asked him if he was okay. He looks kind of depressed. Zhuhan ordered Kaichin and Shu to go back with her brother and for them to pack their things. She was surprised. Why did he need to do that so suddenly? The heroes approached the young boy's chambers. They were surprised to see him there. He replied to the heroes, had fate itself brought them together in the same place? So why don't they come in now that they're here? Zhuhan was surprised to see on the table. White judging feather. Well, friends, I don't know about you, but I like this manhwa. The plot itself is quite interesting and intriguing. So if you like the video, then subscribe to the channel and write a comment about what you liked. If new chapters of this title are released, I will definitely make a continuation. All the best. See you soon.